Everybody in the block knows we're recording now. 10 seconds. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our meeting this evening. A very busy agenda on every front. So let's get started with the 43rd meeting of the 143rd Council of the Corporation of the City of St. Thomas. Any disclosures of interest from any of the members? Seeing none, we'll move to minutes.
Thank you, Your Worship. We seem to be getting a little reverberation this evening. I have a motion that the minutes of the meeting held on November the 20th, 2023 be confirmed. Moved by Councillor Herbert, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Next.
Next, Council will resolve itself into Committee of the Whole to deal with the following business. First committee this evening is Strategic Direction and Development. First item relates to the Elgin County Railway Museum lands. I have motion that report PD 5023 relating to a letter received regarding the Elgin County Railway Museum property at 225 Wellington Street be received for information. Moved by Councillor Wookey, seconded by Councillor Clark.
Questions or comments? Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Your Worship. I would just like to see this process keep moving along as quickly as possible. And I note in the report that says refer to the official plan review. I don't know how long that is going to take. Would we be farther ahead to move towards a special policy area for this, anticipating that we are going to see investment made by the Doug Terry Group, and there's going to have to be alignment made with the railway. So there's going to have to be capital work involved. I'm trying to figure out what is the quickest way to keep this process moving. Lou?
Lou? Mr. Pompili, I know that this was a response to a letter from someone, so please let us know where we might get to where Councillor Peters is talking about, moving it along as quick as we can.
Yeah, through Your Worship, yes. The direction that I received was just basically to provide a response to the letter. So I provided that. Just a lot of it is just my opinion in interpreting the letter. But the underlying theme in there was that there was a desire by the author, and I think there was some communication also that went through the Heritage Committee as well, but no direction from the Heritage Committee, that these lands, when they develop, they should develop by way of a secondary plan when that happens. The only Planning Act application that we had before us at the time was a consent. So that's not an appropriate time to consider a secondary plan. But going forward, as we know that there was some interest to develop these lands, the best way forward is that they probably develop by way of a secondary plan. So I laid out some options to do that. I mean, one thing, maybe a way to keep it moving along is that we as staff can reach out to property owners, stakeholders in that area and see if there is an interest on their part to initiate a secondary plan for that area. And in the meantime, keep moving our processes of our official plan review that will identify this area as a key area that's appropriate for a secondary plan, and even identify it as a special policy area. So those are steps that we can do if council provides that direction.
You go ahead and finish.
So supplementary to that, if council were to direct staff to reach out, would you be just reaching out to the Railway Museum and Doug Terry Limited, or to all the players of this larger jigsaw puzzle, whether that's Don McCaig with his property, the museum or the railway station, Doug Terry's other property, there's the other property towards Queso Crossing that we're aware of, which is a substantial parcel of land, plus back to Mr. McCaig again. So when you say reach out, are you saying reach out to everybody?
Mr. Pompili?
Yeah, through your worship. If we were to reach out, I think I've identified anyway in this report that the appropriate area for consideration here would be that broader area, which is Talbot, Ross,
First.
Wellington and Queso. So we would be reaching out to all those properties there, property owners, stakeholders in that area.
Okay. Counselor Clark.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through you, to me, the last paragraph of the report is probably the least cumbersome, which is reaching out to those individuals. That way we don't get bogged down in any of the other secondary plan. Could take months or years, depending on when we decide to move with it. Sorry, the official plan update. So I would concur that we just move forward and speak to the involved parties. And it mentions that our staff would in a previous meeting, we mentioned that our staff would be directing the thing.
Great. Further discussion on the report? That's the direction then, is that the council would, that last paragraph seems to sum up would be an expedient way of going. Okay. So all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
Your worship, unless there are any further items under strategic direction and development, we'll now move into community engagement and services. No items on the agenda at this time unless there are any items from the members. And seeing none, we'll move into infrastructure and civic operations. First item relates to the 2023-24 New Year's Eve free transit service. I have a motion that report ES 6923 relating to the 2023-24 New Year's Eve free transit service and overnight on-street parking be received for information, and further the council approve the free transit service on New Year's Eve from 5:45 PM on Sunday, December the 31st, 2023 to 2:45 AM on Monday, January the 1st, 2024. And further, the council approve the suspension of enforcement for overnight parking restrictions on January the 1st, 2024 between the hours of 2 AM and 6 AM. Moved by Councillor Baldwin Sands, seconded by Councillor McCauley.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Unless there are any further items for this committee, we'll now move.
Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Worship. Item of new business to Jeff Bray. As the nights are getting colder now, what are the plans, if any, for outdoor ice skating rink up at Morrison or any others that could potentially be proposed?
Thank you,
Mr.
Mayor
Bray?
Preston, through you. The last 2 years, Doug Terry has led a volunteer group to proceed with that. To date, there has been no discussion with the Terry group or other volunteers to coordinate that. I think that last year, as you recall, they had everything set up just after New Year's. And the temperature fluctuation, I'm not sure they ever got ice established.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clark.
Do we own or does the volunteer group own the foundation part of it that we would be flooding onto?
The rink kit.
Yeah.
Mr. Bray, do you know that?
It was on city property and they had a donation from GearLinks for the boards. And city staff helped them set it up and taught them how to do it properly. So I'm assuming that the volunteers still own the boards for that.
So as we move it forward, we would be able to do that again?
Yeah, we're happy to assist.
Okay.
Yeah. And the fire department also was great. They did the floods for us.
So can we take some leadership role on this and reach out to the volunteer group that did it in the past, find out where they're at? And
I'll take that on if you wish me to. I'll talk to the
Sure.
Terry group and the GearLinks group as to are they in it this year, and if so, when would we start?
Let me know if you need anything.
Thank you. Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Your Worship. Would the assumption be to be looking at more than one site? We only had one site, I believe, last year. So
Last
would-
2
would the
years.
Plan B for a second site when the meetings take place?
If the community group that comes together is willing to do more than one Councillor Herbert, I guess we'll say yes if they can come forward with that. But in the past years, it's been a collective group on
Yeah.
one site. So I'll ask that question too. Councillor Wookie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Sorry, Mr. Bray, you're gonna have to get up again and, getting some excellent exercise with that sharp looking shirt. Councillor Peters got me thinking about ice, and you and I talk regularly about ice fishing on Lake Margaret. And it's about that time of year, and just, for the benefit of council and everyone watching, we know that the bass fishing season closes over January and February. So we know that by MNR rules, you can't ice fish. But I've seen that there are exceptions to that in certain areas of Ontario where you're allowed to ice fish, and it's never made sense to me because the fish are not spawning at that time. So you're not interfering with spawning. So just maybe a comment from you regarding who we can talk to see if that's current or changeable or anything like that. Thanks very much, Mr. Bray.
Mr. Bray.
Thank you, Mayor Preston. I'll have to go through my notes because I believe I did ask my contact at MNRF that last year. Just off the top of my head, there's different jurisdictions and somehow the fishery biologists determine when that closure happens, but I will go through my notes and I'll contact my contact at that's a lot of contacting at the MNRF.
Thank you.
I'll get back to you.
If I can add to this right now, talking of ice fishing when the weather's been the way it is a bit dangerous.
Yeah.
So I'll just add that part that on behalf of our fire chief and other public safety officials, that please don't go out on the ice till someone tells us it's safe to go out on the ice, whether it's for ice fishing or for skating. So I thank you for asking about it tonight, but it's a bit premature for walking on water at the moment. So we'll get back and we'll certainly say it from this chair if indeed we think it's now safe to walk on Lake Margaret or any other ice surface in St. Thomas. Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, ice fishing brings its dangerous things going through the ice, but I'd be curious to know if the fire department is prepared for someone to go through the ice. Do they have the equipment necessary to go out and help somebody who sinks through the ice? I don't know if we've talked about this before or not, but it's a possibility. But so I see the fire chief is here. Thanks.
Thanks for coming up, Chief. I tried to cover you with the don't do it till the chief says, but you're here. You can say it yourself now.
Absolutely. Through your worship to Councilor Herbert. Yes, we're trained in ice water rescue, whether it be swift water, shore base or ice rescue. We train on that as much as we can. We have the equipment, the staff and the training to if somebody goes through the ice.
Thank you. Further items for this committee? Seeing none.
We'll now move into corporate governance and administration. No items on the agenda at this time unless there are any items from the members. Seeing none, council will now reconvene into regular session. I have a motion that the recommendations, directions, and actions of council and committee of the whole, as recorded in the minutes of this date, be confirmed, ratified, and adopted. Moved by Councillor Kohler, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next, we move into reports of committees. 3 reports this evening. The first report relates to a heritage alteration permit for the property at 739 Talbot Street. I have a motion that report MHC 1723 relating to heritage alteration permit for 739 Talbot Street be received for information, and further that council issue a heritage alteration permit for the property at 739 Talbot Street relating to application HAP 1423. Moved by Councillor Baldwin Sands, seconded by Councillor Clark.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Second item relates to a request for alterations for the property at 76 Talbot Street. I have a motion that report MHC 1823 relating to the request for alterations at 76 Talbot Street be received for information, and further that council consent to the proposed alterations to install new footings, posts, beams, and internal drainage at 76 Talbot Street, and further that notice of council's decision be provided to the Ontario Heritage Trust. Moved by Councillor McCauley, second by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Third report relates to a request for alterations for the property at 502 Talbot Street. I have motion that report MHC 1923 relating to the request for alterations at 502 Talbot Street be received for information. And further, the council consent to the proposed alterations to install a black 5-foot-high chain link fence at 502 Talbot Street. And further, that notice of council's decision be provided to the Ontario Heritage Trust. Moved by Counselor Wookey, seconded by Counselor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next, we move into petitions and communications. First item, the only item on the agenda actually, is a letter received from the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority regarding the authority's 2024 draft budget and levy apportionment. Your worship, unless there are any further items from the members under petitions and communications, we'll now move into unfinished business of council. And
Any unfinished business?
now seeing none, new business of council. Seeing no items, we'll now move into bylaws. I have a motion that leave be granted to bring in the bylaws. Moved by Counselor Peters, second by Counselor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
I have a motion by Counselor Peters, seconded by Counselor Herbert, that the bylaws be now read a first time, referred to council and committee of the whole, and read a second time.
Questions or comments? Seeing none? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
First bylaw, please.
First bylaw is a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting held on the 4th day of December, 2023.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. Next bylaw, please.
Second and final bylaw is a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of the corporation to a certain agreement between the city and Mission Systems Development Corporation. This relates to an amended purchase of service agreement.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. Your worship, I rise and report the successful passing of the two bylaws.
Great.
I have a motion by Counselor Peters, seconded by Counselor Herbert, that the report of council and committee of the whole on the two bylaws be received and adopted. The same be read a third time, engrossed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed and numbered.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
No public notice or notices of motion this evening. Your worship, there is a need for moving into closed session. At this time, I have a motion that this meeting be closed to deal with a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality and a proposed or pending disposition of land. Moved by Counselor Baldwin-Sands, seconded by Counselor Gibson.
I guess before I call the vote, we're forced at 5:30 to move to budget. And do we have time to finish the items in our closed session by that time? Do we? Just looking for Counselor Peters?
Well, your worship, I would rather see us go right into the budget. We have Rogers here tonight.
That's right.
And I think it would be beneficial for the ratepayers of St. Thomas to hear some of the discussion as to how we spend their money and invest their money. So personally, I'd like to just see us keep going, and hopefully Rogers will carry on as well too.
Are we allowed procedurally? Because I know that meeting was called for 5:30. If we go to budget early, do we break any big rules? And I'm okay with breaking little ones.
Your worship, if anyone is, anyone from members of the public, either at home or coming to the meeting was scheduled for 5:30. And so technically we should not be starting before 5:30.
Okay, I would feel more comfortable, and this is just me speaking from the chair, that we break until 5:30, but I'd rather us keep going at something, but yeah, of course, the other way to handle it is us quickly move into 304 to handle the closed meeting agendas, but it still leaves dead time on Rogers, which is probably not something I'd like to do either. but we're kind of under time crunches tonight because we have our budget meeting starting at 5:30. We have a public meeting starting at 6 o'clock. We've finished our open agenda, which is way to go. Thank you. I should have slowed you all down a little, I guess. All right, but then after that, we still have our closed session. And that wasn't a question, I know, but it's if I keep talking for another 11 minutes, we'll be at 5:30. It's rather than throw everybody out of this room, if we go do that, go do closed in 304. Okay, so we had a reason to close the meeting. I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. So we are closed. Your council will. Seeing none. What's our next step?
Your worship, at this time, there will be, the members have received a memorandum from the director, and the director and the city manager will introduce the process and the proposed budgets.
Okay. Mr. Treasurer, City Manager, your show.
Thank you, your worship, through you to council. There's a few slides here I put together for give some of the highlights. You should. Our podium or
If you hit podium, you should have it on your screen.
Zoom or podium should work.
There we are.
Okay, just a sec.
There we go.
There. So you, yeah, okay. Okay. So in this presentation, there's just a few slides to go through. There's a community context. There's the citizen engagement feedback, the budget itself. There's a bit on grants, and then the capital budget. St. Thomas, we all know the single tier municipality in the County of Elgin, approximately 43,000 people. St. Thomas has a lot of municipal services. We share costing with the province and the county for certain things. So in the fall, we ran a budget survey on the website. We had approximately 340 responses. The results of the survey showed that the majority of respondents are in favor of maintaining the current levels of service that the city provides. And also many people asked for enhancements in social services and health services. The other section in that, excuse me, the other section in the survey was for general comments. And there was a wide variety of comments in there, but kind of many people talked about affordable housing and more resources for our vulnerable population. And others talked about the need for more spending in transportation and recreation. So the budget, staff The budget here is what staff is recommending. We feel that this represents what the city needs to maintain our services and service levels and to move forward. The recommended levy is $69 million, which is an increase of $4.3 million over the 22 levy. We are very fortunate this year to have a large growth number. Without this large number, the tax levy increase would have been significantly higher. If we had last year's number, we would have been looking at 5%. The adjusted levy increase now is 3.49%. A 1% tax increase or a tax levy of 1% is $647,000. For a median household in St. Thomas, that equates to $103 per year or $8.56 per month. So for every 1% increase in the levy for this household, it amounts to $29.67 in additional property taxes. There were some reductions that, well, the departments came back and we asked for them to lean their budgets out a little bit. They did that, but on top of that, there was some things to reduce. There's no funding for grant requests in here for the St. Thomas Elgin General Hospital or the Elgin Hospice. In each of the last 3 years, the capital levy was increased by $500,000. This year, in this budget currently, it is increased only by $200,000 to try and bring the levy down. We also used infrastructure reserve funds in the amount of $200,000 to cover an operating expense that was a one-time only expense. The grants, the top 3 grants have adjustments in for CPI. The cemetery grant has a one-time addition of $6,500 for a piece of equipment that's needed. Senior center grant is the same, and the community grants are set at the same as in 2023. The capital budget. Staff is recommending a $52 million 2024 capital budget. This includes an additional $200,000 that I mentioned earlier in capital funding. The net amount of the budget is around 42 million because the budget contains previously approved money in about $10 million worth. The budget also shows $7 million in debt or other sources for future housing development. It's said as it's unknown, but it'll be debt or something. It'll depend on when the projects are approved, what the city has available to it for funding sources. So. And that's it. Do we have any immediate questions or do we just want to carry on?
Well, I would suggest let's ask for questions at that point. We've got a number that we've gone to. We know what capital is and we know where we stand. So I'll ask for questions from members of council. Mr. Treasurer.
Can I just mention there is another small presentation by our city engineer. Maybe we do that first and then we can get into it.
I'm happy to do that. Is that on asset management? Is that what? Yep. Then great. Let's do that too. Kevin, please go ahead.
Thank you, your worship, and through you to members of council, just a quick update on the state of local infrastructure as part of your asset management planning process. Wanted to share. Hang on, how come it's not changing here? There we go. Yep, that's fine. So based on 2023 replacement values, the total net worth of the city-owned assets is now $2 billion. That includes all of your fleet for your water mains, your housing, basically everything within the corporation. You'll see that nearly half of that is into water and sewer assets. The other 35, the other third is into your streetscape assets, with the remaining little under 20% in your facilities and related assets. Overall, from a condition-based perspective, I would say this is a very good report card. 81% of your assets are in a good to very good condition, with maybe only 10% of your assets in a poor to very poor condition. So that's very encouraging to see. You'll notice in your budget package that there's report cards for each of the asset categories. And basically just to read those is the first little bit is what do we own and how much is it worth? How does its condition compare to others? You'll see two little bar graphs. What has the city's condition trend been over the last 5 years? So we can understand what our trend is. And for budget discussions, what is our historical funding been for that particular asset? And what's our targets? Moving to the very bottom of the page, you'll see what our infrastructure gap is, or the backlog for that particular asset category. When you summarize all of the asset report cards together, you get into a table that basically identifies that there's about $60 million worth of backlog or infrastructure work for us to complete. At some point in time, we'll keep chipping away at that. As Dan had mentioned, there's a 2024 budget capital request for the asset categories that we're reporting on. The new ask is equivalent to about $27 million, which is a bit below our asset management plan funding targets when you add it all up together. And what we've noticed is that overall, the target funding variance for the past couple of years has been in a declining trend. And mainly that's because it's hard to keep up with the rate of inflation lately. So that's all that simply means. It means you're just getting a little bit less for that dollar that you had a couple of years ago. And with that, that was just a brief little update on the asset management state of local infrastructure for council's info.
That's it? Super. Council, we've got about 15 minutes until we move further on into an open public meeting, and then we'll return to budget. But I think what we should do now is either general comments on what Kevin and the treasurer said, and perhaps open your capital budget page, and we can have discussions on it also. Councillor Wookey.
Thank you. I'll start off with a general question for Mr. Sheridan, if I can, about reserves. After doing this city council thing for a long time, the reserves are still something that I don't know a whole lot about. And I just have a question, Mr. Sheridan, about this. If I can just refer to the 2024 reserve and reserve fund forecast. When we have a negative balance in a reserve, what happens? Like I see the sewer reserve looks like it's a negative balance of 2.4 $4 or $5 million by the end of this year. And I'm just wondering how does that work? Because it's kind of counterintuitive for me that in a reserve fund, there would be a deficit. Or I could be reading it wrong. Thank you very much.
Mr. Sheridan?
Thank you. We're hoping that's going to be a temporary deficit. We'll either zero that out, internal borrow until we can replace it. We've increased, as we know, the sewer rates and all of that to try and make up the deficit in there. Last few years, we spent a lot of money in the sewer area. So we're really hoping that it'll turn around it'll take a few years, but we should be turning it around and going in the right direction to get it above board.
Okay, just a follow up then. To be geeky, like how do we internally fund this? Like how does it work and where do we shift money from inside the corporation to cover that? Like how does that work? Because I don't understand how we do that. I know we've done it before, but I just don't understand how we do it.
Well, if you look in the reserves, we have a large amount of reserves in other ones. So we have all the other reserves that we borrow from temporarily, just so to replace that money. We'll bring it back to zero, just so it shows a zero balance.
Okay, thank you. Because I didn't know whether those were all accounted for separately in separate accounts or whether they could be mixed and mingled. So thank you very much, Mr. Sheridan.
Thank you. Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple general comments. The two items that were grants that have been on a lot of people's minds in the community is the MRI project and the renovations to that wing of the hospital that would be necessitated by that purchase, and also hospice. And we haven't addressed either one of those, and we referred them to the budget for discussion. So, I don't have a problem with where the budget number is at, and I could offer a solution to not raise the levy, but still accommodate those two requests. And that is through our long-term debt. We have long-term debt at Valley View for about $800,000 a year over the next 2 years. And then that debt will be over with. And both of those organizations have said that they were most willing and able and pleased to receive any grant or any donation from us over a number of years. So if we waited, as long as we made a commitment and waited 2 years, we could take the money that we're saving with Valley View off the books over 4 years. 8 times 4 is 3.2 million, which is exactly the request from those two projects. And so without raising the levy in any of those years, we could accommodate those two projects. And I think from what we heard in the survey about the number of requests from people wanting to see those projects move forward and expanded healthcare, I think they're on the public's mind, and this is a way to accomplish it without raising the levy.
Great. Councillor Peters first, then Councillor Kohler.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm assuming these are just general comments.
Right now, we're general comments.
Okay. Well, I want to build on what Councillor Wookie has just commented on it and what Councillor Clark has just commented on. And that is, we have a strategic plan for the municipality. We've got a new strategic plan going down the pipe. We've got a capital asset management plan. We just saw the presentation of it. And I think we need to look at our financial side of things. And what is our long-term financial plan for the community? And reserves are part of it. Debt levels are part of it. Retiring debt levels are part of it. We've got the capital asks that Councillor Clark just referred to of the hospice and hospital. There's money in this budget to begin the process of a new aquatic center, recreational center. That's going to be a big ticket item. And parking that aside, we've also know that we've got growth that's going to be coming to the community with Volkswagen. What the financial impact of that is going to be, we don't know yet, but I think we're all hopeful, presuming that it's going to be substantive for the municipality. We've also got VW growth related expenditures that are going to come out of it that are substantive as well too. And I would like to see us, and this isn't taking anything away from our city staff, but looking at hiring a consultant, a firm, a financial firm to work with our staff, work with us as a council, to let's start getting in place. If we're looking to 2033 for an asset management plan, Councillor Clark's looking ahead of how we can spend money as it is retired from debt. Let's get a sound financial plan in place for the municipality that goes hand in hand with these other things that we're doing. Because I think the financial plan can start, as we can start to project out growth, then we can start to make significant investments in those areas, knowing that we are going to have new revenues coming in. But I don't think we should be just picking something in isolation. I would rather see us have a formalized plan. We're not going to have that tonight, but let's set the groundwork in place there's all kinds of good financial firms out there that could potentially help us. And I'm advocating that we direct staff to report back on how we develop, if we have these other plans. Let's have a long-term financial plan in place for the municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Peters. Councillor Kohler.
Thanks, Your Worship. I definitely don't disagree with what Councillor Peters said, but I think we somewhat do have a long-term plan in place and certainly don't mind having that discussion. But I know when you look back through here, we've increased the budget quite a bit with new positions. So I don't want to really be bringing consultants in where I think the people around this table with staff can probably make some of those decisions, but maybe the best route is to get somebody in for assistance. I know, Your Worship, you and I had a brief conversation about the hospice and hospital, and I like the way Councillor Clark thinks, because that's exactly where I was looking, as well as the hospital commitment coming to an end too. So it does give us some room without increasing this budget. And to be honest with you, I think staff's done a fantastic job with this budget. I'd like to see it under 3%. I have some suggestions for that. And, you know, as Councillor Peters talked about the VW and the future commitment coming, I wouldn't generally like to see the use of reserves, but I think this is a perfect time where we could mitigate some of the pressures on the current taxpayer of today by using some of those capital reserves to complete this work, but without penalizing the people of today. We have the goose, we're just waiting for it to lay the golden egg. And I think that time we can then replenish some of the reserves and increase capital work without putting too much hurt on people today that could be refinancing their houses at 3 to 4 times what their current interest rate is. So I'd hate to add that burden to them.
Further general discussion. We have about 5 minutes before we have to go to a public meeting. So Councillor Baldwin-Stanton.
I thank Councillor Peters for bringing up the Community Aquatic Center. And one of the things that I do look at when I look at this budget is what we have been doing and what we are proposing, especially for something as small as part of our budget, is for JC Pool. And what I pulled out from that, as we're looking forward to doing more recreation programs with an aquatics facility that will be year round, is the new additions that they've been doing at the JC Northside Pool this year. And that is 375 new participants between 6 and 7 p.m. only for Aquafit and Lane Swim. Those are adults. And I've said around this table multiple times how swimming is the #1 activity that you do for your entire life, that #1 activity that women do. And this being able to say, hey, listen, we're doing this type of programming at our outdoor pool. And in a very short period of time, if you compare to 579 children taking swimming lessons, to 375 new people going to do lane swim and aquatic fitness, there is a need in the community, and hopefully I'll come up with some other ideas when we talk more about the budget and see moving forward with our community aquatic facility and the committee work that has been taking place up until this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin Sands. Further general comments, Councillor Wookie.
Thanks, your worship. I'm certainly on the same page as Councillor Peters in terms of a long-term forecasting out. Because as we get to the point where we're asked to fund other things, I don't want to one-off things. I can't stand one-offing things. I appreciate what Councillor Clark's saying and how we can do it without affecting the taxpayer directly this year, and I applaud him for that. I want to say again, and I've said this before, when I started here in 2014, I was shocked by the gong show that was the community grant process. There was no policy. It was just a free-for-all. And it was embarrassing, frankly. It really was. And we do now have a policy, and some people might not like it, but at least we understand it and the public can understand it. And that's very important to me, that it's transparent and at least open. I'll say again, for those things that we're going to put money towards that will not show up on our consolidated balance sheet, I have some significant concerns about a lack of policy surrounding that. So when we come to giving money to the hospitals, or anybody else whose asset will not show up on our balance sheet, I think we need to have a policy to govern that. And really right now, I'm not really suggesting a policy. I have some things in my head, but that's not important. The important thing is that we have a discussion about a policy, because we know more people are going to ask, and they're going to ask before the retirement of these debts is convenient for us. So I'm hoping that as we go through this, whether we do what Councillor Clark's saying or not, I'm hoping that very shortly we can have a robust discussion and come up with a policy of how we will fund such projects. And that goes dovetail with what Councillor Peters is saying about a long-term financial plan, because you can't have that without that in my mind. Thank you very much.
Well, and I'll jump in to fill in the gap till we go to our public meeting. I believe that the dovetailing appears to happen with our strategic plan and our budgeting. We do budgeting on an annual basis, but this group will soon be enthralled with a whole process of strategic plan that looks forward in decades rather than single years. So some of the things we're talking about, whether it's huge recreational facilities, or where are we in 5 years from a revenue point of view, or where are we in 10 years from a revenue point of view? And how do we deal with, as you mentioned, we seem to have helped clean up the grant process, the more minor grant process that we always had a bit of a trouble with, but now we need to come up with, how do we deal with donations towards things that are not ours, that are not in our purview, and hospitals and healthcare grants seem to fall into that. So we need to suggest how we'll do it. Part of this was referred to budget from hospice and an MRI point of view, and it is ours to discuss in this process, but also in our strategic planning process. How will we deal with that in the future? And I think we need to be more comprehensive about how we deal with that. We'll be faced at some point in the future with a new hospital or a major renovation of a hospital. How will the city deal with that? We're currently dealing with physician recruitment in a large way. And this is healthcare, and it's not ours, but it's ours. We need to do it to be a vibrant community. So you're right, our strategic plan, we need to remind ourselves that some of this stuff has to go to strategic planning to match what we've said in budget. And as far as has been asked about hospice or MRI, I think we still have to gather some more facts. Some of our neighbors have yet to make a commitment to either of those projects, and I'd like us to know that information before we do too. So I think that from a general point of view, I think we're feeling pretty comfortable about what the experts in our corporation have said moving forward from a taxation and budgeting and spending point of view over the next year. I agree with Councillor Peters. There may be some gold in the future, but we can't spend future gold. We've got to spend with what we know today and where our assets need the most help, as Kevin brought to us today too. So we'll leave that one at that. At 6 o'clock, we'll go to the open public meeting. The minute it is over, we will return to the budgeting process we've generally done comments. And let's then move to, as we normally do as a council, and I'll take your guidance, move into the capital expenditures for the upcoming year so we can decide where we are on each of those. So at being 6 o'clock, I'll call the public meeting to order. and this public meeting is required under the Planning Act to afford any person an opportunity to make representation with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for lands known as 125 Centennial Ave. This proposal is a residential development containing 12 two-story townhouses in 3 blocks and 1 existing single detached dwelling. Before we begin, members of the public are advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the corporation of the city of St. Thomas before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the council of the corporation of city of St. Thomas to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Further, if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or has already made written submissions to the corporation of the city of St. Thomas before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing in the appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. Those wanting to be notified of the council's decision should email customerservice@stthomas.ca and provide their name and address. And of course, recognize you're talking about the public meeting for Centennial Ave. Those that do not have a computer and wish to be notified should call customer service at 1519-631-1680 extension 0 and provide your name and address and what meeting you were asking for information on. Do any of the members members of council have a disclosure of interest concerning any of the matters on this agenda? Seeing none, then I'll ask the clerk, what method of notice and when was notice given to the public for this meeting?
Your worship, notice was provided in the St. Thomas Times Journal on Friday, November the 10th, 2023. And in accordance with council policies, notice was also mailed to property owners within 120 meters of the subject property.
I'll now introduce, and he needs no introduction, of course, but I'll now introduce Jim McComb, our Director of Planning, or Manager of Planning Services, who will provide the background information on the proposal and present the draft bylaw. Mr. McComb, great to have you here with us again.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's always a pleasure to come and see council. This is a welcome change from the old times during the pandemic where you'd only see the screen. So it's certainly a pleasure to be back. So on the screen right now, we have a slide that shows the location plan where the subject lands are located at the north west corner of Centennial Avenue and Wellington Street. We also have our aerial photograph, which again is showing the subject lands highlighted in red, again at that northwest corner. And the lands also abut existing development along Hedges Court and some existing houses fronting onto Wellington Street and Centennial Ave as well. Next slide I have up here is a copy of the conceptual site plan for the property. Essentially, there'll be one entrance off of Wellington Street. There'll be 12 townhouse units developed in blocks of 5 and a block of 3. There's a fairly large, it's over 8,000 square foot common area. You can see that it's got a little bit of like a hatch pattern to it. And the other thing you'll see on the site plan is there's an existing house that fronts onto Centennial, which will remain in the R1 zone. And we just have to put a special provision for the existing front yard setback on that one. So it would possibly set up a future severance of that property at some point in the future, should they decide to do so. So we have drafted an amendment to the bylaw with respect to the proposed development. First part of that amendment further amends bylaw 50-88 by zoning the lands that are shown outlined in heavy solid lines on Schedule A, which I'll put up in a second. So the one in heavy solid line going into the R3-118, and zoning the lands that are shown hatched on the schedule is R1-33. The schedule will form part of the bylaw and be known as Special Zoning Map 33-4. So here is that special zoning map, and again, you can see in the heavy solid line the R3-118 provision or designation being placed on that, and the smaller hatched area where the existing house is being placed into the R1-33. Going on with the text of the amendment, part 2 introduces a new paragraph of the bylaw, 7.5.118. The area affected is the R3-118 as was shown on the special map part. The maximum number of dwelling units would be set at 12 and a minimum rear yard of 6 meters. Next part of the bylaw amendment is section 3. It further amends the bylaw by adding a new paragraph 5.5.33. The area affected by this particular provision is the R1-33 that was shown in the special zoning map part that covers the existing house. And as I stated earlier, it's establishing a minimum front yard of 2 meters. And finally, as is our practice in anticipation of the eventual consolidation of the bylaw, we have a Schedule B to the amendment, which is zoning map 33 that has been amended to include all of the changes to date on that map part, including this proposed amendment. And so the last slide is that consolidated zoning map 33, and it shows the subject lands at this area right here, going into the R3-118 and the R1-33. So that is the draft amendment, Your Worship, if there are any questions.
Thank you. We'll get right to those. Madam Clerk, have you received any written submissions on the proposed changes?
Your worship, we have received several letters regarding concerns, and those concerns are relating to traffic, privacy, property values, a potential for low-income housing, safety, waste management, drainage, and aesthetics of the neighborhood. There were also a couple of questions regarding tree removal and fencing. And in addition, a petition with 75 signatures was received in opposition to a multifamily complex.
Thank you. We'll ask council first if they have any questions. I'll go by raising your hands. So if council have any questions of Mr. McComb on this topic. Mr. Councilor Wookie.
Thanks, Your Worship. Mr. McComb, while you're up there, I was just curious. So the existing house is there on the lot, okay, fine. And there's that amenity space. Let's say this becomes a condo complex and later on that land, somebody says, hey, I want to put an 8-plex there or something like that. Like I don't know what the plan is, but I find it kind of interesting that the old house is being left there. What would be their process if somebody wanted to do that down the line to densify that lot further? Can they take away a designated amenity space to do that, or would they just be using where the old house is now? So can you give me some guidance about what the rules are regarding that? Thank you.
Mr. McComb.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, Councilor Wookie. So if they want to further intensify development on the land, this particular amendment is only going to permit 12 additional units. So they have to come back, number one, for another zoning amendment. So council would have an opportunity to review that and decide on whether or not it would want to pass that further amendment. We'd also have to take a look at how are they proposing to set up these additional units on the property. I mean, this is a decent plan in the sense that there's 12 additional units, but they're offering up a fairly decent sized common space for the residents who will be living here to just enjoy some outdoor activity. And staff found that to be a very important aspect of this particular development. The existing house, they put that into a separate zone. It's remaining an R1 zone because they may in fact actually sever that off at some point in the future, which would eliminate the opportunity for any access to that potential, additional lands from Centennial. So it would require a number of changes. It would all have to come back to council for further consideration.
Just follow up then, but as far as the amenity area itself goes, if this goes through in some way, shape, or form, and I have other comments about how it might look, but the amenity area could not be taken out and added in with the old house to create a larger unit for densification. So is that what happens with that amenity area? Because it's a beautiful amenity area and I applaud that, but I just don't want to see that consolidated and removed, but I don't know. So can you comment about that specific thing about the amenity area, please?
Your Worship, through you again. So if they wish to take off the house and maybe take part of the amenity area, that number one is going to require a consent to create that lot in the first place. This development will also be subject to site plan control. That means they have to revise their site plan And again, they'd have to come back to council for more zoning changes. So there's various levels of approval that they would require before that would even get any consideration. And of course, we have mandatory consultation with them. If they came back and said, well, we have a change to the proposal, staff would have an opportunity at that time to say, look, we like this plan the way it is. We like the amenity space. We'd like to keep it on the plan. This has all been approved. You have site plan approval for it. So they'd have a bit of an uphill road to travel on that one.
Thank you.
Further questions from council? Councillor Peters.
Thanks, your worship. My issue with this development and is like others that we have had in front of us is the incompatibility with the existing neighborhood. And this issue is not going to get easier for us down the road. Quite honestly, I think it's going to get worse when the province passed Bill 23, which is focused in on intensification. I'm not opposed to intensification, but I'm opposed to intensification where it doesn't fit in with an existing neighborhood. And I think that this is a prime example of that, much like South Edgeware was when it was in front of us previously. So I just want to go on the record that I don't think this is compatible for the neighborhood. And I'm also concerned, notwithstanding whatever council may do, our track record at an unelected appointed body known as LPAT, appointed by the province, notwithstanding decisions that we make at the local level, that decisions that we believe in or decisions that help to support communities and neighborhoods, the track record that we've seen and I fear we're going to continue to see is that this unelected appointed body is going to continue to overrule local decision making.
Further questions or comments from council? At this moment, then, we'll open the meeting to questions from the public for those attending who have not already submitted their concerns or comments to the city. If you're listening on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, please use the raised hand icon, and we'll call those in the order in which we received them. If you've called into the meeting, please dial *9. The questions on telephone, please use *9. The questions will be taken in the sequence in that order. When the opportunity to speak, please provide your name and address for the clerk's record. Okay, so I have a couple of hands up. So Margaret Collins, it says your hand is up. If you are unmuted, we'd love you to go ahead as soon as you unmute yourself and you are unmuted for the meeting. Please let us know your name and address and then your questions, please. Okay, Margaret, I think you're unmuted, so go ahead. We can't hear you, so we're ensure you're unmuted at your end and please ask us any question you have. Are we having a difficulty at our end? Councilor, Mr. McComb?
Thank you, your worship. If it would help, we did receive actually some written correspondence from Ms. Collins. And she had 5 points that she wanted to bring to council's attention. I believe you did receive this.
We've all received.
But
yep.
for Mrs. Collins' benefit, I'll just quickly go through these if that'd be fine.
Sure.
So her first concerns the location of the snow storage and possible damage to the adjoining lawn from salt burn and ask if it could be moved away from the north property line. Second was that the surface drain on the north side of the development is very close to the property line. What damage will be done to her yard and the proper repair? Number 3, is there going to be a wooden privacy fence constructed along the north property line? This is very similar to other townhouse developments in the city that have occurred. 4, the existing house has a sump pump. What corrective action will be done to stop the current and future discharge from flooding my front yard? And 5, why are all the trees being removed and some along the north property line were removed without property owner permission? Will the stumps on the north property, since the trees were removed, be removed at the cost to the developer since the first contractor cleaning up the brush left a mess on said property? So those were Ms. Collins' comments.
Did
A
you
lot of
wanna-
those would be addressed at the site plan stage. But
Okay, so yours to address, but not here?
not through the zoning itself. The zoning is really just dealing with the number of units and that rear yard setback. So.
Okay. The next I have up with a hand up. Yeah, you can take me back to attendees, was Paul Fleury. I see your hand, Paul. And again, if we can unmute you and you can come through with your question, please with your name and address first. So Paul will unmute you from our end, you unmute from your end. I see you're unmuted by my screen. Try. I hear you, I think. So please give us your name, address, and then your question or comment, please.
Okay, my name is Paul Fleury. My address is 9 Hedges Court, so I am directly behind this development. I'd like to also mention that I have a couple of my neighbors here that don't have computers and don't know how to Zoom, so I don't know if you want their names or not, so.
Well, Paul, when we're done yours, if I see your hand up again, I'll assume it may be somebody else who's there with you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So let's start with yours.
Okay, well, I got a few things here I wanna discuss. So, so I'm obviously strongly opposed to the rezoning for numerous reasons. 6 meters from my fence line, that's a pickup truck length away from the building to my fence. So, so from an R1 to an R3, like we're gonna suffer a lot of property loss here and 100% of our privacy. And we're entitled to enjoyment of our property, right? In our backyard, we have a pool, deck, all that. And we would have never bought this place if there was townhouses right behind us, right? So, and the purpose of zoning is to safeguard property and value and promote harmonious communities. And bylaws have standards also and regulations that need to be adhered to. R1 zoning, I mean, it's a one home, right? R3, now I talked to Jim at the planning office and he told me that even with an R3, like it's 4 units per lot, not 12. And it would also have to be set back 9 meters from the fence, not 6. Right, so your plan and the planning justification report on page 8, they're quoting the city of St. Thomas, and all these things on here, I mean, like enhance the character of the area, like for all these infills and redevelopment, it's supposed to enhance the character of the area. That is not going to happen. You know, sensitive to the height, scale, and architectural design of buildings in the surrounding neighborhood. That's not a part of it. Sensitive to the community or continuity of residential streetscapes. Sorry, that's also not, it's not valid. None of this is not valid. And adequate parking, off-street parking. I'm looking at the plan. It says, from what I can see, there might be enough parking for 2 cars in a driveway. I mean, if this is a family that's got like 3 drivers or 4, those people are going to be parking on Wellington Street. And for us to even try and get out of Hedges Court onto Wellington Street, it's like everyone on my street has mentioned this to me that I talked to. Like we've almost all gotten accidents even trying to get out of here. So I mean, with the added people parking on the street, we'll have no sight line towards Centennial if people are parking on the street down there. And I'd even be concerned for the safety of people pulling out of that access point with the Centennial traffic that is coming around. They come around there quick, like they're gearing up the speed when they hit that area. Also, I'd like to mention that on the city official planning policies, it says new lots created by consent must be of a size consistent with the average size of lots within the surrounding area. And it says in all new cases, or new lots must be met with requirements of zoning bylaws. So, I mean, it's an R1 zone. You want to change it to an R3. I mean, even if it's an R3, that means 4 units and 9 meters from the fence line. And that's, you know, our privacy is important. Yeah. This is not going to add to the character of the surrounding neighborhood or complement the community as it proposes it's going to do. And I'd also like to mention the traffic impact report that was sent along with, you know, with this. It says that it was done in 2018 for the proposal, and this was for proposal of the Yarmouth Heights development, which is down the road. That, I mean, they did mention numbers for Wellington and Centennial, but those are just forecasts and assumptions, right? There is no like real study done now. Like after this road's opened up, we got so much, you know, the subdivision down at the west end of, or the south end, sorry, of Centennial, and with the Yarmouth Heights, and you know, they built up quite a bit there now. I just feel that a real traffic impact report with real numbers would be much better than what they sent in here, because like I said, these are assumptions. And you did do a traffic counter in 2021, I see, and it had like 7,900 cars going up and down Centennial, but that was during COVID. I mean, people were mostly sitting at home, not working or out of a job. That's like those numbers don't pertain to anything. So, yeah, this traffic impact report means nothing really if you look through it. They're all forecasts. And I mean, with the amount of traffic that we have coming up and down Wellington Street right now, people coming in and out of that access point that they want to build, and Hedges Court, there's going to be an accident at some point. I can see it for sure. Let's see, something else. And on page 8 of the traffic impact brief, the Transportation Association of Canada states that a minimum site distance of 105 meters is recommended to accommodate turning movements from the site access. And according to the plans, that's only going to be 70 meters from Centennial Avenue to the access point into this development. That's a safety concern, I would think. And as far as like, you could say, oh, we'll just put no parking signs and stuff on Wellington Road, so the site access sight lines can be seen easier. I don't think that's gonna work either, because if you take and put no parking signs up on Wellington Street, they would definitely be parking on our street. We don't need that because we have no parking on our street as it is now. So, developers are using the provincial policy statement to justify building more units and provide more housing. Well, a lot of people that I talk to in our neighborhood are wondering, why are they not, like, say, severing that land and putting like single family homes in there, or R1 zoning lots? Like, they could fit housing in there that way. Or say, even if you did change it to a zone 3 and you put 4 units on that property, is that not still meeting your standards of the provincial policy statement of adding more homes in that sense? I just think trying to jam 12 houses on that property, it's going to be too crowded, I believe. And obviously I don't want a building 6 meters from my fence line. We've been here 20 years, and we've had some privacy this whole entire time. And then we kind of like to keep a little bit of privacy without having something, a pickup truck like away from my fence line. I think that's pretty well what I wanted to say. Obviously, I'm opposed to it. So
Thank you, Mr. Fleury, for your information. It's great for us to hear it. Let's move on to one of our other hands up, and the next one I have is Riamson at Hotmail. So Riamson, if you can unmute yourself. Seems to have
Good evening.
disappeared. Sorry.
Good evening.
Good evening. Give us your name and address, please.
Stephanie Reimer at 14 Hedges Court.
Okay.
I think Paul Fleury spoke very well on a lot of different things. I do have a concern about this 2008 traffic census. I do agree with him. We can't get out of our street now, and you add all those extra traffic conglomeration of 12 different housing units, potentially each having 2. That's 24 vehicles coming out of that area. Never mind us getting out. You could put no parking zones, but you're going to have an even worse problem as people park on their boulevards now when you can't see to get out. So I have a huge problem with that.
Okay, thank you for sharing that with us. And
I also
go ahead. Please, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You go ahead.
Sorry, Paul was mentioning about the South subdivision. I think everybody is well aware of the battery plant, you know, being built in St. Thomas. And over the next couple of years, you're going to have even more people coming and going into St. Thomas. And Centennial is a huge artery into and out of St. Thomas. That's just going to add more confusion. I think that also needs to be looked at, because that census, I think, is an absolute joke. And I am totally opposed to it.
All right. Thank you for your input this evening. We'll move on to the next hand up. I see it's a Rick Lachine. Rick, if you can unmute yourself, and we'll unmute you from this end, I hope. And when you're free, when you see yourself free, Rick, please come on with your name and address for us, please.
Hopefully I'm unmuted now.
You are. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much. And I just wanted to thank Councilman Peters as well. I think he kind of hit the nail on the head. We're at 600 Wellington Street, which is just a little bit west, very little west of where the proposed development will be. I had read through everything too, and I just kind of was a little shocked because an R1 zoning obviously doesn't satisfy the proposed development. And an R3 actually doesn't even satisfy it because of the 2 provisions that regarding max dwellings as well as the rear yard setback. The other concern that I have, and I think Paul pretty much covered every single thing I think that were concerns, but there was just concerns around the traffic. I think that's one area where I think Paul has absolutely hit the nail on the head, and the other ones that have spoken as well. I sat here this afternoon and counted over 30 cars drive by at around 3 o'clock in probably less than a minute. The traffic that comes around the corner off of Centennial, I mean, there's a lot of it. It moves very, very quickly. And as Paul said, when you're coming off of Hedges, we grab our mail from the super mailbox around the corner. Literally, you cannot get out, and the cars are coming from both ways along Wellington. There was another thing that was indicated in there that within the next 10 years, I think they're planning on putting a bike lane in, which I think is probably a recipe for disaster given what the traffic is right now. And that doesn't even include the proposed battery plant. I'm sure that as Centennial, Elm, Wellington will be the arteries from the west. And that traffic study that was done in 2021, I think Paul as well covered that it was done in a period of time where a lot of people were kind of locked in their homes. So it may not be reflective really of the traffic currently, or the potential traffic going forward as well. The other one is just the area. It is, I don't think anybody would probably be opposed to the R1 zoning currently and just continuing houses down along that, severing off the properties. But right now it does. I mean, when you come in to the end of this area and drive across to see townhouses, it does differ dramatically from just I guess, what the characteristics of the neighborhood is right now. It also indicates on there that any lots consistent, I think Paul covered that as well, in the surrounded area must meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw. So I guess that was a little confusing in the sense that they're going from an R1 to an R3, but then amendments have to be made or changes have to be made under the R3 in order to satisfy the development as well. So now, if I could, I don't know if these questions, I just have two other quick questions. One would be, is there a reason, or could there be provisions put in place in regards to, I think Councillor Wookey covered it, as to what the amended, or sorry, what that area, the common amenity space, is that an area that is just put in by the developer as a kind of a courtesy to the people that would be in there? And what would exactly be in an amenity space, or is that just for future development? And then secondly, is there any reason that the going into the complex could not come off of Centennial Ave? And I think that's probably all I have now. Well, one final question. Any submissions, can submissions still come in regards to the written statements that I just had at this point until the bylaw is actually voted on?
No, we've taken a number of written submissions already. Mr. McComb, please answer that one if you would.
Thank you, Worship. Certainly people can submit written submissions. What the act basically says in terms of their rights to appeal, and that is if they haven't made a written submission or spoke at a council meeting up until the time council makes its decision. So they're certainly welcome, and if we receive anything, we'll certainly report back on any additional comments that are made.
If I can speak from the chair, in most of these cases, we have a public meeting like this so that council can gather your information also. And the planning department takes those submissions and come back to us with a report for us to make a decision on the zoning change. The night isn't the night we'll make that decision. It's the night we're gathering your thoughts and sharing them among ourselves so that when it does come back to us and some of the answers you've asked for would come back with that. So thank you for that. Sorry.
Your worship, if I could just get Mr. Lacheyne's address, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't ask for that, did I? Go ahead. Mr. Lacheyne, if you could enter your address in the comments or come back on real quick and give it to us.
Yep, I think, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, we're at 600 Wellington Street.
Super.
Myself and my
Thank
wife,
you.
Brenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see a couple more hands up. At this moment, we'll entertain as many comments as we get, but I'm watching now for repetition. If you agree with someone who already has spoke, please share that you agree with them and then answer or enter your own comments. The next one I have is a phone number. So if somebody was dialed in with a phone number, it's 519-971 and then some other numbers. So you're up. If you can try and unmute yourself and then please give us your name and address. All right, you look unmuted to me.
Hello, I'm not sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Please name and address.
Okay, awesome. Yes, my name is Sandra Medeiros, and I'm located at 16 Hedges Court. Very much like-minded to the majority of people that are opposed to this, as well as the Councilman Peters. I did want to address the traffic piece. You know, I myself have a 6-year-old daughter who gets picked up at a bus right at the corner of Centennial and Wellington. And Centennial and Wellington, as we all know, is very high in traffic, especially during those very incremental hours around 8 a.m. So our bus pickup is at 8:03 for St. Anne's. There's quite a few children in the neighborhood that do go to Centennial and Wellington for pickup. And furthermore, even some high schools that are a little bit further down on Centennial. So when I was reading the reports under the traffic to see that, future forecasting is 2% of an increase, I found that to be merely laughable, if I'm being, truthful, because we do see an increase already, just with the growing subdivisions around the neighboring area. So, I would like to see that before this gets passed, that we look at that very seriously, because these are tiny individuals, and it's been on more than one occasion where we have had people not abide by, that stop sign that comes out of that yellow bus, and that they are just flying on by. It's already a high traffic area. So to think about not just the people that we're adding in or having 12 units and what that traffic will look like, but what does that also mean for the tiny people that are going to be walking to that school bus in the midst of the construction as well? I'd like to see that, the city is not just looking at, what the planning is, but more so what the impact is going to be to the people that are going on the school bus, the little ones, the ones that are unable to, or may not really realize that they're, going to step on something that they shouldn't have. And, you've just allowed your grade 2 to start walking to the bus down the way. And now something has happened, because of a construction site or, high traffic. And we've now moved cars to start parking on Wellington. So I'd really like to see, I agree with everything that has been placed here. I think from a property value perspective, all of it. But I definitely would like to see that we are addressing the 2% increase. I think that that's, really not a true number to what we actually see present day, and that we are looking at, what are we doing with the buses, because we have a lot of kids in our neighborhood. And to see that, they're going to be getting on buses right near a construction zone, as a parent, that is heavily concerning to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Paul Fleury back, but before him, let's go to Sarah Ditchburn. She's been waiting on the list before, and then we'll go back to Mr. Fleury's house where others are waiting. So Sarah Ditchburn, if you can unmute yourself, and we'll unmute you from this end. Yours is the next hand we're looking at. When you are unmuted, please give us your name and address, and we'll move on from there.
Sounds good. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, awesome. So I am Sarah Ditchburn. I reside at 117 Centennial, which is about 2 properties north of this particular proposed development. I did submit a letter, and I just want to talk about a couple points. I just want to also let you know that I do fully agree with all of the previous callers' points. And I do want to talk to the traffic piece first, knowing that Sandy did touch on the traffic at Centennial Avenue for that morning stop. The afternoon is equally, if not in some cases, more concerning. My daughter is dropped off south of Wellington on Wellington, sort of south of this particular development on Wellington, directly across from where this proposed driveway into this development is. We have been in several cases narrowly missed by vehicles speeding through, turning onto Wellington from Centennial. It's been very scary for us. So just wanted to reiterate that point. I don't think that we can belabor that, or I don't think we can, emphasize that anymore for you. It's very, very important that that's addressed. I have a concern with regards to overall waste management with this particular development. And I have a personal situation to disclose as well. During the clearing of this property's trees about 18 months ago, Some properties directly north of this particular proposed development did encounter some pests being stirred up. My concern is with a large dumpster style bin waste system. That problem will be even more so an issue. A lot of the properties within the area are unfenced properties, large properties, which, you know, fencing these properties, hiring pest management comes at a significant cost for the other homeowners. St. Thomas has not done a great job eradicating our rat issue. And this is not something that I need to deal with as a homeowner due to this development. I do agree with the other callers in the sense that I'd be completely open to seeing the severing of this property to other single family dwellings. I think that's a great idea. But am completely opposed to the development as designed here today. In addition, maybe also personal concern with regards to if the current property management company is going to be maintaining this particular complex. Over the past several years, this particular address has been very much not kept, triggering many calls, I know, to the city with regards to overgrown grass, which can bring ticks and other pests to the area. Lots of walnuts are falling from these trees. My daughter has wiped out on her bike several times because they've been just left all over the sidewalk, and almost broke her arm in one case over the summer. So just very concerned with the overall maintenance, waste management. Yes, traffic's an issue. Aesthetics of the area, agreeing with all the previous points.
Super. Thank you very much for your input tonight. We'll move back to Paul Fleury's computer. So whoever joins us now will go on off mute so you can join us and give us your name and your address. And again, I'm looking for us to continue to take input, but if it's input that's already been said, please just agree with what's been said and we can move on to new points. So Paul Fleury, it's not Paul, but please tell us who you are and your address.
Hi, it's Monica Metcalf. I live at 10 Hedges Court. And I'm just in agreement with every previous caller that made all the points that I had in mind. So again, traffic, like I'm agreeable to a couple of residential, but not a townhouse. But there's just too many issues involved. So I'm agreeing with everybody that's spoken already. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I will move now to, is there any others with hands up? It says there's one with a hand up, but I can't see it on my screen. There we go. It's Alex DeDecker. Please join us. Unmute yourself. We'll unmute you from this end if we have to, and you go ahead and chat with us.
Hello. Yeah, this is Alex DeDecker from 603 Wellington.
Okay.
So I'd like to make it known that I'm in agreement with all the statements made in opposition to this. As you can see, my lot is the 603 Wellington, which is directly would be looking in across basically our front side and the side of our house, all the way through our side yard and the backyard. We have, lots of windows facing towards this new development, which would all be directly affected. And as Paul mentioned, with the 6 meters away, not a lot of privacy there. That directly affects our privacy, and I think greatly diminishes the value of our home and property. So like to make it known. I agree with all the statements about traffic, the points made about bus pickups and things, and traffic, even just getting across the road with 2 kids and to get across the road for bus pickup and everything, it's we have to wait quite a while for all the cars to come off of Centennial. flying through Wellington to actually get across the road, things like that. So I'm just strongly opposed and in agreement with everything that's been said.
Well, thank you, Alex, for your input tonight too. I have no more hands up, or do I at
Your
Paul
worship,
Fleury's?
I'm just looking and I see that there's a hand up under panelists.
Well, I can't see panelists without clicking that, and I can't click it, so there we go.
I believe the name is Sandra Congdon from SBM.
Right, so Sandra, if you have input, please, it's your turn.
Good evening, Chair, Council. Can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay, thank you. Just like to thank everyone who's taken the time to participate tonight. My name is Sandra Condon. I am here on behalf of Strick Baldinelli Moniz. We are representing the applicant and we are here on behalf of the owner for 125 Centennial Ave. So the owner from Sherry Cannon from Cannon Homes is present here this evening, as well as another member of our development team, Nick Dijak, and we are happy to answer questions if we can be of assistance. First off, I'd like to thank Jim McComb and Lou Pompelli and other staff from the planning and engineering and building departments that have helped us navigate this application process, and they have spent a significant amount of time helping us come up with a plan that the planning staff are satisfied with, and come up with this ultimate layout that you have before you. This property represents a great opportunity for small infill development within the city of St. Thomas. The proposed development is within the low density residential threshold, and it is the efficient use of services and facilities that are available within the city of St. Thomas. The requested variances or site-specific provisions that we're looking for on this site represent planning standards that are typical of other developments of this nature, and not overly small in comparison to what you might see in another townhouse development somewhere else. We feel that the two-story proposed development that we are setting forth here is in character with the two-story homes that are in the surrounding neighborhood. The properties have 2 parking spaces per unit, in addition to some visitor parking that we are providing for on site. And if the amenity area, I've heard a few people address the amenity area. That space will, at this point, we don't know, but it will be either a grassed area, or there can be some small amenity features added to this area, but it is simply for the enjoyment of the residents of this space. We have reviewed the staff report that has been provided to council, and we are in agreement with the recommendations of staff. And just to add once again that we are available if we can be of assistance with any questions. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for joining us tonight and sharing that. We'll go back to attendees. I see a couple of hands on that side, and we'll try and take information from all we can. So we're back to the Paul Fleury House. We'll go there first, and looking to unmute that computer and unmute here. And please go ahead with your name and your address.
My name is Lynn Pitcher. I live at 7 Hedges Court, right beside Paul Fleury and family, and directly either behind or in front of this proposed area. I've been on this street since it started, and it has always been a very welcoming street. Everybody gets along, and we want to leave it like that. nobody wants a lot of any more traffic. Nobody wants any of the things that have already been mentioned that are degrading, and we certainly don't want our property value to decline. This is a good area, good people. The traffic flow, well, that's another story, but it can't possibly get worse. As everybody said, it's a wonder we haven't had a severe accident. Actually, one of the families on this street, Hedges Court, took it upon themselves to drive up Hedges Court to Wellington Street and put their car out as far as they could, or as far as they needed to see properly and measure 35.6 feet to see. Now that's ridiculous. At any rate, I definitely do agree with everybody. It's just not suitable for our neighborhood. And the woman that just spoke before, good for you. You'll get a bonus on your paycheck.
Thank you. I see no other hands up under the attendees, and we thank you for all of the input you were able to share with us tonight. We know we had a number of pieces of input that came from the neighbors, and so we have those too. I'll ask one more time at council. Is there any questions from council? Councillor Peters or Councillor Herbert?
Thank you, Worship. I waited till we heard all the comments. It's kind of a catch-22 for me. I know when I was elected 5 years ago, the mandate of council was housing. We need townhouses, we need houses. But on the other side of the coin, we've been involved in 2 or 3 areas in the city where we really didn't like what was going to go in there. And I can't agree here that this townhouse is going to be aesthetically pleasing in this neighborhood. We have 78 people who sent in concerns. I think we have to take a step back and listen to them. They have a lot of good reasons. There's traffic and land value, et cetera. So I just not so sure it's a good fit there. And there's a lot of good reasons why. So in saying that, I'm going to have to really take another look at before I can say one way or the other. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering through the process of developing the site with planning, whether or not the developer and planning had looked at all moving because of the very short lot line on the west side, whether or not they had looked at putting all those townhouses across the north end, making that a 5-unit building on the north edge of the property, and extending the block C, which is currently a 5, and moving it to a 6, and shifting the whole road over so that the project isn't in the backyards of everyone along Hedges, and still accomplishes the number of units that the developer might want. To me, having the project so close to the lot line is very disconcerting.
Great input, Councillor Clark. Thank you. Councillor Wookie.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I want to concur with what Councillor Clark was saying. I go back to our 63 Elm Street situation where they did an excellent job of putting in townhomes beside the railway tracks there where we didn't think there actually could be housing. But the developer, upon our input, I believe, decided to flip it so that the exact same thing would not occur there. In other words, a 6-meter setback, 2 stories overlooking people's backyards on Parkside Drive. So I would encourage a reconsideration of that to protect the privacy of the folks that are on at 603 Wellington and on Hedges. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thanks. Mine was a question. I was wondering whether or not staff could address that, or
Jim, Mr. McComb, would you like to answer whether that's been looked at or can be looked at?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Clark. We had 5 consultations on this particular subject. prior to them actually filing this application. So we saw a number of iterations of different concepts from them. But as you heard from Ms. Condon, the developer and her consultants have been listening in. They've heard the comments. And so we'll be reporting back to council. But before we do, we'll likely arrange a meeting with them to see if they'd like to make any changes to the plan, or if they want to stick with this plan and bring it back for council's consideration.
Thank you, Mr. McCune. That's exactly why we have these public meetings. Before it comes back to council, the issues discussed can be addressed. Councillor Herbert.
Thank you. Just kind of a follow-up. I agree with Councillor Clark and Councillor Wookie. The lot, that townhouse is so close to the lot line, and I wanted to mention that and I forgot. So I think it's really something that, as Councillor Clark said, maybe it could be rejigged and worked something a little bit different. So anyway, thank you.
Further questions from council? Then in the opinion of the mayor, the public and the council has been given fair opportunity to express their views regarding the proposal, and should be stated that everyone's been given a fair opportunity. And if there are any further questions, please be advised that any person wishing further information on the actions of council regarding the passing of a bylaw for the proposed amendment should email customer service at customerservice@stthomas.ca and provide their name and address. And for those that do not have access to a computer and wish to be notified, should call customer service at 519-631-1680, extension 0, and provide the same information. This public meeting is now concluded. To give 5 minutes recess. Before we do, we will do that. We'll follow, as soon as we have the members back in their chairs, we'll start again. We would go first to we discussed that we would go first to the capital budget page, and we'll take a quick round the council tables on capital budget. As you know, staff puts a lot of effort into what order, what's on the will do list, what's in the not do list. So let's, I'll take questions or comments on the capital budget list. Councillor Wookie.
Thank you very much. I was very, very pleased with what was on the capital budget list. And I just have one simple question, I guess. On the not recommended is the LED lights at Joe Thornton Center. I see that there, I don't have my glasses on. We're talking $110,000. Do we have an idea of how much we would save per year in costs if we put those in? That's just my only question on that one. Thanks very much.
Mr. Bray, very quickly on that, is there a huge saving to us spending that money?
Through you, Mayor Preston, I do not have that stat in front of me, but the life cycle would be, it'd be a few years. I can find out.
Thank you. Councillor Herbert's next hand, and then Clark Peters.
Thank you, Worship. I spent a lot of time on the capital budget because I always find those projects interesting. And I couldn't really see anything that I say we shouldn't do now. We're moving forward. We got a 2027 deadline. We need a lot of these things now. And so I would personally support what I see here on the paper. So thank you.
Great. You can live with what's on this page. Fantastic. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Your Worship. Well, I have trouble with the budget when we haven't addressed the question of the two major grants. So, I mean, if we're going to talk about what's in or what's out, it's hard to say unless we're talking about what we want the final budget is. So if you're suggesting that the 3 point whatever is where we want to end up, then I would say, okay, let's find 800,000 to pull out, because I'd like to see us address what I feel the taxpayers want, and that is to see the hospice move forward in a timely fashion and to see the MRI project move forward in a timely fashion. And until we've talked about how we're going to address that, if we're not going to support it, then let's have a vote and not support it. Or if we're going to support it, let's decide how we move forward with this, because it is budget time. And I don't care if the county hasn't given their okay to the project or not. I think we need to show some leadership and decide what we're going to do. And hopefully, they come along for the ride. everyone's going to benefit by both these projects. And I think we have to make a decision one way or the other before we can go ahead with with the budget as it is, or I won't accept, but I would vote against the budget if we're not going to include something for those projects or a way forward for those projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Go to Councillor Peters next.
Thanks, Your Worship. I don't necessarily disagree with Councillor Clark, but I'm going to ask some specifics of why we have to do them. And so I'll start with the Kane Street project. The capital budget as proposed has a roundabout. If council's waiting for a report back, and we'll have a continued discussion, but if council were to say, let's say hypothetically, we didn't want a roundabout, and we wanted to look at a four-way stop, how much savings would there be in dropping a roundabout and going with a four-way stop?
Kevin? I keep using your first name and everybody else's last. I'll straighten around.
That's okay. There's lots of E's in the last name. So through the chair to Councillor Peters, there's a report coming forward to council to the next council meeting to talk about the Kane Street project and provide you more information. As requested, we did receive a petition. We had a public information center. So we're coming back to provide an update on those comments and whatnot. But I can say to you that the difference in cost is about $250,000 between the two. And that if we were to delay the project for another construction season with construction inflation, you'll lose that by delaying it a year. So that's basically, I think, would be helpful for you at this time.
Okay, thanks. Could you just clarify though, if council were to change its plans and potentially have 250,000 could be reallocated to other things, why that would delay the project?
Through the chair to Councillor Peters, we'd have to redesign that area of the project in order to do that, and that just doesn't happen overnight. We would be tendering during the construction season if we want to move forward with that project, and we'd likely see higher than regular pricing because we'd like to get out early. We were in that situation with this project last time, and so let's avoid that situation again the next time we want to tender this project.
Thank you. I'll reserve my further comments till we see that report then. Capital project, Bill Martin Parkway. The last line catches my eye is oversizing sanitaries to accommodate future development. But we are already at the south end of the city at that point. And unless somebody knows something that I don't know, and that St. Thomas is going further south, why do we need to spend that money now? I could see if the farm immediately to the south on Southdale, the former Hepburn Farm, was part of the city of St. Thomas, that we would be oversizing. But why? And so are there some potential savings if council were to say, we don't agree with the oversizing? Once again, potential savings that could be reallocated into things like hospice/hospital.
Through the mayor to Councillor Peters, the fundings for this project is coming from development charges, which means it was identified in the development charge background study. So any savings wouldn't be able to be allocated to a different project. It was specifically identified for this purpose. The opportunity to increase the size of the sanitary presents itself because of the need for water main looping and for servicing of a proposed new animal shelter in this area. So it's achieving two birds with one stone, one for future development as identified in the background study for the DCs, and the other to help facilitate servicing for a potential animal shelter.
Thank you. The next question would be regarding the city hall, the council chamber, $75,000. I'm looking up at brass rails that look pretty brassy and shiny to me. And I believe they've already been raised once to deal with and alleviate safety issues. I know that there was some talk of, I know Councillor Wookie and I are kind of in a corner back here, but I can tell you, I can sit like this for another year and revisit the $75,000 that would be allocated to restoring the chamber again to try and find some money for hospice project and hospital project.
Mr. Sheridan on the council chambers?
If you notice, in the chart there for the capital, that project has no impact on the 2024 cap, levy. It's $0 in there. This is money that we've already approved from before. It's one of those jobs that it just sort of rolled over again. So it has no impact on the taxes this year.
That's fine, but that's not to say that we can't reallocate it back to something else, but
Yeah, it could, but this came from modernization funding also, so it has to be used for, there is some things that it has to be used for.
okay. My final question, your worship, when you look at the map of the 10-year capital forecast, you note on the map that a 2020-24 project identified on the map is the Barwick Street Bridge. Yet there's no allocation for capital in the budget for the Barwick Street Bridge. And just wondering if the director could clarify sort of that discrepancy. And that's the end of my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Dealey-Rick?
Thank you, Mary Preston. Through you to Councillor Peters, the Barwick Bridge was not included as part of the capital submission for recommended approved capital projects. So we're still working with CN on the design phase. I actually have a meeting with them later this week to go through that, and which we'll also be talking about cost sharing. So at this point in time, we're not including that in the recommendation for 2024 because I don't believe we'll be into construction in 2024.
Councillor Kohler?
Thanks, your worship. I don't have any issue with any of the projects. As I said earlier, I was looking for 1% with what the treasurer presented earlier today, and now it's less than that. I'd like to see us achieve something under 1%. Having said that, I don't want to see any of the projects cut from capital, but I want to see the tax funded levy reduced by $400,000, and if necessary, allocated from the reserves fund. I'm looking at the infrastructure reserve, but I'll leave that up to staff, whichever one they think is more appropriate. I look at some of the funds that we're looking at, and I think that the 400,000 actually will be found through some of the early tendering. I know staff's going to look at the vehicle and equipment replacement, and they'll either get some extended life cycle or get some good deals, and we're not going to spend the full 2 million, but I feel comfortable that 400,000, we probably won't even have to dip into reserves. That will most likely actually end up putting money back into reserves once we get the good tendering out. Myself, I've got a couple just small adjustments that I want to look at in the operating budget, and then a question from the operating budget. But first of all, that's what I'd like to do, is reduce the tax funded allocation to reserves and use, or to capital and use reserves if necessary. And I also would like us to, whether we vote on a letter of intent or something tonight, so that there is some sort of commitment to the hospice and the MRI without affecting this budget, but starting next budget and then increasing to in 2026, but over a long period of time to make sure that we're not impacting the current ratepayer too much, but also making sure that those vital projects proceed. So I don't know if there's possible to give some comfort to some other members and myself that if we can pass something like that to state that next year's budget will have a small amount in it. And then as we move forward into 2026, when the Valley View funds, Valley View debt is paid off, that we allocate some more funds to those two projects.
That, to me, that was the thought process, Councillor Kohler, is that we can make commitments with future towards those great projects. And of course, with hospice, we already have with the land to begin with. There's no intent to suggest we're not playing in those two projects. It's just, at what point do we start making the payments towards them? And will that fit their proposals? And that's why why I suggested we're also looking to make sure that they're getting their proposals from other levels of government and other municipalities also. So I have no problem suggesting that with the coming off of other funds that we have, whether Valley View or others, that we'll stop on, that we will eventually can move back into funding projects that our citizens are asking for. Further questions from council? Councillor Baldwin Sands.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank Councillor Peters for bringing up the roundabout on King Street. I had that as well. Was hoping that that item could be brought up as a separate item as a motion. Also, I too am looking for more information on not just what our neighboring communities are doing for hospice and for hospital, but I'm also interested in finding out on a more comprehensive way how other communities are handling requests by hospitals to do some funding, because there has been a gap shortage from provincial funding, and it's been municipalities all over the province of Ontario that have been asked to pick up the burden. I know that this is a different one project, but there is future projects. So I would like to see from administration some sort of comprehensive professional study that would allow us to take a look at what other municipalities are doing, not just our neighboring municipalities for the same project, but example, Woodstock. So what are Woodstock, what sort of requests that have been done in the past, maybe that have been done in the future, and how that municipality is handling the requests from their local hospital. So again, to the roundabout on Kane Street, separate it out and do it as a separate motion. I am very grateful for page 24, the housing development and the opportunities to do that. And I thank staff for all of the innovations that they have been doing in the past, during this term of council and the previous term of council, by making those good things happen for this community. Also, page 28, I talked a little bit about Northside Pool. That pool is a very old pool, and there was a period of time where nothing was done for an extended period of time, which ended up resulting in a very large capital expenditure. So I fully support these upgrades that are suggesting at this time, because in the past we had to absorb rather substantial costs to our only pool that we have as a community, and it is an outdoor pool. I do have a question in regards to page 30, the insurance costs, or on the surveillance system. Is that going to be a standalone system, or is that going to be tied into our CCTV system? There's possibility to get an answer there, please.
Mr. Bray.
Thank you, Mayor Preston. It'll be a standalone system monitored by staff. They'll be able to, it'll have an app where they can monitor things off hours on their phone. And off hours systems we have now, it links in with police services depending on the type of incident that is occurring.
Thank you very much. I appreciate finding out more information on that. And I was thrilled to see page 38, the EV vehicles and charging stations. Thank you so very much. And I'm also very grateful that another one of my colleagues has brought up the Barwick Street Bridge. So those are all my comments on the capital for now, and I look forward to further discussions. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the capital budget sheet itself, Councillor Wookie?
Thank you very much. Just on something, I just wrote a note to myself, city website ?
That's how I describe it.
Like that's all.
Sorry.
Good one. You should just stand up. Just a comment about when we're going to work on that, because every time I try to navigate the city website, like I get frustrated and I know what things are called more or less. So if we can just get some commentary about that. Thank you.
Mr. Sheridan?
Thank you. There is money in there for it. It's a part of the IT upgrades.
Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Worship. Just a question about the airport. We seem to defer the airport and the condition of some of the hangars and the runways year after year. And I'm just wondering if we're waiting for federal or provincial money or possible grants that we're aware of, or is it just because we don't have the funds again this year to address them?
Well, if I can just try and cover it from here and the clerk can help me, is we've spent a lot on our airport in the last couple of years. But again, federal and provincial grants and money. So you're absolutely right. Sometimes we have to wait till there's something there that we can use, or we spend taxpayers' money on it. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. At this time, we're not aware of any funding. And so it would be great to, if there were. We were fairly lucky with the last two bits. But otherwise, it comes from the property tax base.
If I can just give an opinion, I feel that we're certainly hearing from both levels of government, and I don't think it's incorrect to suggest that they have a housing emphasis at each other level of government, that we're going to see a little, for the next couple of years, a little less towards other projects the feds and the province might have funded in the past and really help us through housing crisis. And so by us talking about housing growth, we know that we think we might be in the right place for the asks. But they can surprise us, and we'll be ready, whether it's recreationally based or the airport based, should something come forward from the other levels of government. Further questions or comments on the capital budget? Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Worship. My final one was, because I'm not sure whether this is a capital or an operational, and I didn't see it in the Parks Forestry budget as an operational issue, and I don't see it here as a capital issue. And that is something that's been talked about, of a comprehensive tree replant program. There's been a lot of trees that have are helping to support redevelopment of substantial parcels of land. Since that announcement, we have missed a spring replant season. We've missed a fall replant season. And I'd like to know where we're at with a tree planting plan so that we do not miss another season and we can take advantage of spring of 2024, but I don't see any money in the budget, either operational or capital.
I think Mr. Bray, I may call on you on tree planting plans, but certainly industrial development is the area where we'll need to do more. But we certainly can't plant trees until the buildings are built there, and that we knew that kind of going in, that we could start the plan, but I'll let Mr. Bray.
Well, but just, Your Worship, I don't disagree with you there, but what I'm getting at is I wasn't anticipating that every one of those trees was going to be replanted out there. Because if we replanted every one of the trees, we'd be right back where we started. So I have made the assumption that a comprehensive replant plan to compensate for what we have had to do to support the development would be a citywide plan.
Right. Okay, Mr. Bray, on the replanting of trees.
Thank you, Mayor Preston. I can say that the industrial development team, they've allocated $100,000 to start spading trees. I know that's a drop in the bucket. Our staff has put out an RFP. It's been awarded, so that's going to be ongoing. I haven't seen a report from the industrial development team's consultants on the tree allocation, how many trees should be planted. Our staff are looking at spots within the municipality, our foresters, as to how many we have had that plan finished. We had funding for, so we know where there's available spots to plant trees. We've also been in contact. We've had meetings with Kettle Creek to see what their long-term plans are with respect to reforestation and how much available land they have.
Oliver? No. Okay. Okay, on the capital budget, the way it sits, I'm not hearing a great deal of negative as to where the lines, and in the past years, we've kind of said, got to draw the line in a different spot. Can I just kind of get a nod of heads that we can accept the capital budget on the page that it currently reads? Okay, with us going forward on the total budget still, and if it means we've got to find something. It may mean finding it on the capital budget, but fairly much accepting it the way that is. Okay, if I have that done, or we're there, Councillor Clark.
Could you just clarify your comments then on how we're meeting the, you said you're in favor of MRI and you said you're in favor of the hospice. So is that a general commitment of this council, or where are we at in terms of moving forward with that? Because before we close off capital, if we haven't arrived at a sweet spot with that, then I would like to discuss further cuts to capital.
Right. Well, I guess I'll start off in the general sense, and then we can get to a cut if that's what you're looking for to cover that one. Is I expected we'll come back to it pretty severely during our strategic planning process, which happens within the next month or two following our budgeting process, about how we will handle in the future asks from organizations outside of the municipality for large grants. We in past have done them as a one-off each time at council and come up with it, whether it was the 10% in order to help build the hospital plan the last time. I know we've had some conversations about what is our role in healthcare, and we recognize that that healthcare at the municipal level is helping other organizations do what they do best. So I'm hoping that the full conversation that we in our minds have a way where we will find the funds in 2024 or 2025 to move forward. But I think we have to come up with a comprehensive, how will we do that in the future? Is that just open to anybody who comes to us and says, give me this much money to help me finish a project that isn't truly a municipal project? And so I think I would like us to kind of jointly suggest that we can commit the funds in 2025 at missing the 2024 budget, but letting them know that we're committed to doing it. But we want to come up with a way as to what do we have to have in our budget to find the way to do it? There has to be a gap of millions of dollars in order for us to do it. Councillor Clark?
I'm fine with that. And you and I are, sounds like we're on the same wavelength, but I don't know where the rest of the members are at and whether or not there's that commitment.
Well,
so I don't want it to.
Let's do kind of a straw poll on it, then I'm okay.
All right.
Councillor Wookie, you're first.
Yeah, thanks very much. Councillor Clark, I want you to know that I am completely supportive of both these initiatives, but I'm completely against policy-less decisions regarding these. And I think that you've arrived on kind of the short-term solution for this, and whether it's a commitment that comes from the retirement of the debt for Valley View, or as I was asking about, we have reserve funds that we could commit for next year's portion of it. Like, I'm fine with that. But as the mayor just said, like, we're going to have lots more people asking. So I'm committed to it. But again, I'm fine with your solution, I guess is what I'm trying to say, in the short term. Thank you.
I'm looking for nods of heads. Are we generally in the right place? Councillor Gibson.
I have to agree with Councillor Clark. I'd like to move forward. I'm for favor for both of these projects. And I like the idea where we defer it to the 2025 starting off. And yeah, I totally agree with Councillor Clark. Thank you.
Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Worship. I personally agree that obviously the hospice and the MRI are great projects for us. And I'm not too worried down the road if somebody knocks on our door and 6 months from now for another donation or another grant, because we have to deal with it at that time.
Right.
So now we're dealing with the hospice and we've committed to the MRI hospice. And obviously the reserve fund's an excellent idea to get us going there. So support them both and happy to. So.
Right. I think I'm suggesting, and Councillor Clark, I don't want you to think anything different, is that we say yes to them and it will be over a period of time. It won't be a one lump sum kind of payment, but it will help them with their moving forward on the projects. And then as we move forward and as Councillor Wookie has suggested, that through our strategic planning processes where I'm suggesting it needs to be, we come up a way with council handling these in the future and over a period of time, and our budget coming off payment of one to probably move into another. Those types of thoughts need to be part of that plan. I don't want you to think I was thinking anything but that.
No, that's great. I just wasn't sure whether we had, 5 other members that felt the same way.
Okay, so
Thank
we're
you.
working on that. We've heard from 4. Councillor Peters?
Well, I certainly support it, and but I would like to know, I guess, from particularly the hospice perspective, if we say to them, yes, we're prepared to commit this 60,000 a year over 10 years, but we're not going to start to pay you till 2025 at the earliest. Does that change their plans?
I guess once we make the decision.
I don't think it will, but I don't think, and I certainly don't think the hospital's that far along, but no, I'm comfortable making a commitment for 2025 for both
I
projects.
think we're making some assumptions at this level to get us past this hump with, and if someone is having difficulty with that, or the project's not going to go because of how we're spreading it out, then we'll need to hear that, of course, but I'm with you. I don't think we'll hear that. And I suppose tomorrow morning by 8 o'clock, we'll have that answer if we did this tonight, so. Any other comments or suggestions on how we best deal with that type of long-term grant? And is there anybody absolutely against it? And I will tell you, I was one of the people who was. This is not an area of which municipal governments are supposed to be funding. And when we get to healthcare, it's the provincial government who should be funding. But we're also asking for a growing and thriving community, and that requires a great hospital, and it probably requires a hospice, being one of the few communities that doesn't. So we're kind of caught in the twixt there of what is good and what is bad. But I like us moving forward on this on a progressive nature, and if we can, then we should. Future governments, of course, some of these will go past the term of this council. And of course, future governments can always change their mind, but if this council agrees that's where we're headed, then I think it solidifies it during the term of this council. Councillor Baldwin Sands?
Thank you. I do agree that 2025 is a good place to start. But as I said previously, I still would like to see a comprehensive report from administration that has done a deeper dive into other communities that are facing this
Great.
funding gap.
Yep.
So absolutely, we can move forward tonight if that is the wish and you're wanting to know how we are feeling. I can put it out there that 2025 is a good place to start.
Well, I've heard nobody come out and say, no, we can't do it. I think there's probably some flexibility on how we will decide then, but Councillor Clark, do you feel comfortable? We've got a majority of council that's saying this is a great place to start.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, there's only one taxpayer, and whether or not we think the provincial or federal government should be doing certain things, downloading has been happening for quite a while, and we still need these amenities to be a thriving city and to attract people and to save people's lives. So I'm glad to hear it. Thanks.
Great. Okay. Councillor Baldwin Sands.
Thank you. I am glad to hear that we are moving forward as well, but we also have to recognize that we have a municipal responsibility to long-term care as well.
Yep.
So I think
Yep.
that should be part of the discussion.
Yep.
Thank you.
Surely will be. All right. Okay, let me recap. I think we've looked at capital to a point where that will work. We've looked at the future granting or things that this council may have to do and how that has to be designed in our strategic planning process. We're now at the, if I can surmise, we're at the point where we're at about, correct me when I'm wrong, Treasurer, about 3.4% levy increase if both of those things happen. And I think we have a couple of councillors that would like to see that reduced. If that is the case, if we're looking for, I'm going to suggest it's likely a under 3 number, if that's the thought. That's about 400,000 that we're looking for. Is that correct, Mr. Treasurer? If we tried to get there, how would we find it? Pardon? Well, that's truly operating, but if you want to go line by line in operating, we can do that. I'm trying to get to a point where perhaps we can ask certain questions operating, but perhaps not have to be here going certainly line by line to different departments. That's just my thought, but please let me know if you desire to go line by line through operating, because I'll start that today. Mr. Treasurer?
I just wanted to say 400,000 gets you to like 2.87.
Okay, so a little less than 400,000 if we're looking for a 2.99, if that seems to be a hill we want to hit, right? Councillor Wookie, then Councillor Baldwin Sands.
Thanks, your worship. I'll say the same thing I said last year, that when you got inflation operating at right now, I looked today, it's about 3.5% annualized. That a 3% tax increase is an effective 0.5% decrease in property taxes. And I'll go to my grave with that one. So I think we're doing our job. So I don't really want to see operating cuts so much as if we want to transfer $376,000 out of reserves. I'm okay with that to make that a palatable number. Again, I don't want to go through the budget line by line and pick on somebody's, I don't know, their photocopying budget in terms of what's going on. So that would be my kind of simple solution to this, to avoid a line by line dissection. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Kohler, because I know he wants to say the same thing, so. Or
Thanks, Your
close to it.
Worship. Yeah, I'm pretty much there, and I only had one question, but I don't want to go line for line, but I've identified a couple of lines that could be reduced and based on the last 5 years average. But at the end of the day, if we're going to look at reducing the contribution to capital by 400,000 and pick that up through reserves, I'm fine with that to get it to the under 3%, because I firmly believe that 400,000 would be made up through competitive pricing from getting the budget out early. So, and I'm okay with that. And then I'll leave those two line items alone. But I do have a question, and on the citywide partnership, I don't have any information on that $100,000 line item that's in there. So I'm not sure if we could get an explanation on that.
Did you have an answer for that, or
I believe Director Bray would have an answer on that, but I do
That's what I
have a
was gonna
suggestion
say.
for that item line, please.
Mr. Bray, can you help us with the $100,000 contribution? Why cooperation?
Thanks, Mayor Preston. Sorry, I thought you said library. Yeah. The $100,000 it's a trial to see the uptake of people using a pool during months when JC is not open. So essentially, we're working through, I've met with the Y to see what sort of programs they can supply to Chatham. Sorry, I had a Chatham flashback there, to St. Thomas residents. We're looking at $10,000 a month. It would offset their costs. They still have all their operating on top of that, all maintenance staff, lifeguards, administration. We would work out an arrangement to how to book these. And they also have costs associated with maintaining their pool systems, all the chlorine and materials they have to buy. So we are, and these would be run parallel with theirs. I don't want something exclusionary. So these are St. Thomas people, these are Y people. So it's, we're looking at purely aquatic type programming, swimming lessons, aquafit. And it would just, as I said, this is part of, we're building towards getting I'm going to be presenting an updated report to council in the new year on where we are with the community/aquatic center. So this is part of what we're doing there. I think it would be interesting to see how many residents here would be willing to partake in that program.
Okay, go ahead.
And just follow up, and then throughout the year, we'll get updates on that. And and see how things are going. and-
Absolutely,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, thank you.
Councillor Baldwin says.
I thank staff for doing this initiative. Truly, I do. But $100,000 doesn't go very far when it comes to aquatic programming. $10,000 a month does not go very far when it comes to aquatic programming. We are moving forward with a community center / aquatic facility. The committee has been at work, and what I would like to see instead happen for this $100,000 is and I will ask for a motion for a feasibility study on a community center with an aquatic facility. And I believe that that is the next step on how to move forward. I have talked to the director many, many times about where I go. And where I go, and when I go in, it's a fraction of the price to pay than what you pay at the Y. And the people coming out from St. Thomas are carpooling to those facilities because of the price. And the example that I'll give, if you do a day pass at $15 at our YMCA, you can go to London to the South Community Pool for $4.25. And with a carpool, even if you subsidize that, $15 to 50%, it works out to $7.50 per person or per visit. So if we're subsidizing that, that's the type of impact. I don't believe people will be driven back to the Y because they are already finding alternate solutions until we have our own aquatics facility. And that's why I believe the money will be better spent on doing a feasibility study. And I would like to see that as a motion. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
I'd like to see us move forward with the Y partnership in the first instance to get a feel for what the uptake and need would be as we move forward with a new aquatic center. And this is one way, young kids can, after school at a reduced price, go for a swim. Weekends, more kids and families can partner with the Y, with the city subsidy. I don't see large numbers of teens or kids being able to head to London to a cheaper place. So if we are able to subsidize programs, whether it's swimming or open swims, like a number of other communities do, where they have a partnership with the Y, I think this would be a great way to develop data that we use as we move forward, and as a way of knowing how we should move forward, whether we do it ourselves or do it with a partnership. This would just create more data that we could use to look at a final solution.
Yeah, I'll go to Councillor Peters, but first I'll say we're arguing about spending $100,000 either way. And this is a budget night. So unless we're having somebody saying, don't spend the money, I may ask us to move on to another section. So Councillor Peters.
Well, I'm supportive of making the investment, but I want to make sure we spend the money in the right way to get the best bang for our buck.
Yep.
And the partnership that I want to see going forward with a new aquatic community center is a partnership between the city of St. Thomas and the YMCA.
Right.
I do not want to see us in the business of running more recreational facilities, because we can look in this budget and see what it's already costing us to run recreational facilities, of virtually everything being subsidized by a taxpayer.
Right.
And where I agree with Councillor Baldwin Sands, and I thought some of the discussion we had, I would rather see the money invested into, whether it's a feasibility study or just to get a better feel for what does the community want. Is the capacity exist in the community to go out and raise the money that we're gonna have to have for this? I don't know if it does, because if the users think that this is gonna be 100% funded by the taxpayers, that's not gonna happen. So we need to know, is there the capacity in the community to raise money? What does the community want this facility to look like? And if we are gonna fundraise, we need to have a concept of what this facility is gonna sort of look like. Is it gonna be East Lyons or something from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, or something from Nova Scotia? And if we're gonna make an investment in a partnership, I would rather see it as something that is going to help to move the bar along of getting a community aquatic center in place.
I agree with you. Jeff, Mr. Bray, can you help us with one more? Is there a reason we can't do both? This year's partnership with the Y to help find swimming availability in times when our JC pool isn't in use, but so that the committee can continue to move forward on the planning of what is a recreational center. And as Councillor Peters has said, what is the demand in the city? What is the city looking for? You know, each time we ask, we get a certain number of people suggesting it, but can we do both? I guess that's what I'm asking of you.
Thank you, Mayor Preston. Just to jump ahead a bit of what the committee has been talking about, following what Councillor Peters was saying, we do want to move ahead and do a more comprehensive survey of the community to see what their definitive requirements would be for this. That is, I don't know, parallel is the correct word of doing a trial, for lack of a better term, partnership with the YMCA. I think we can still proceed with the survey. I think I'm investigating the cost of what a feasibility study would be. Councillor Baldwin Sands is probably correct. It can be quite expensive because you want a business plan attached to that. So following what Councillor Peters was saying, everyone always forgets about the high cost of operations to run a facility like this in perpetuity. Is that a word?
Sure. Works for me.
Yeah. So
By saying
that to me,
sequential.
yes, thank you. So that is a very, very important piece to this to move forward. So everyone's eyes are wide open moving into this.
Okay, so with that, I take that as a yes.
Yes.
We'll have to do both as we move forward anyway.
But
But
with
the
respect-
committee, the strategic plan will still include a committee looking forward to I'm going to use quotes, a recreational facility. What that recreational facility has in it would still have to be decided.
That's correct. But to answer your question, I don't think we can do both for the 100,000.
Okay. Councillor Herbert?
Thank you, Worship. I just want some of the councillors to refresh my memory here. And we've talked about this aquatic center for 2-3 years anyway, for sure. And if I recall, and I could be wrong, 2 or 3 years ago, we could get a grant for 88% from the government if we had plans, drawing plans.
If we're ready to go.
We were not ready to go. So we keep talking about doing this and doing that. I don't know. Somehow we have to get on paper what we want, what it looks like. So if that possibility comes up again, we can submit it and get going on. I mean, 88%, my God, that'd have been fantastic if we were ready to go, but we keep surveying where's Jeff? We keep surveying the public, what we want, what we need. Just drive around the province and see the aquatic centers, what basically they all have pools and libraries and recreation areas and hockey rinks, if that's what we need, but let's do something, get it on paper, get some drawings in, so if it happens again, we're ready to go. Anyway, just maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but I do recall something like that quite a few years ago, and here we are again.
It was in our.
We're going to survey the
plan, Councillor Herbert. It was in our strategic plan to do exactly that. And as we refresh our strategic plan, I suspect that we can carry over the strategic plan that asked us to do that in the first place. We get a look at this. I commend this group. We've done an incredible job of meeting 99% of the stuff in our former strategic plan, and then some other great big things that have made our community a better place. So let's, as we move forward into the new strategic planning process, and I know I've been talking about that a lot tonight, let's not forget maybe some of the things that we can just move over, and it's really easy for us to say, let's continue to do it. Because you're right, Councillor Herbert, we said if we don't have it in a box, what it looks like, location kind of picked, on a shelf someplace, and the federal or provincial government comes up with recreational money, we're not ready to bid. We're not ready to do it. So we've got to be that far along to do it. So I commend the work Councillor Baldwin Sands has put to this, but we're not to the point where we said we have to be. So can we Okay, we got really sidetracked on 100 grand to the Y when I'm trying to find, all right, so let's say, oh boy. Because we think this probably has to be, anything we do in the future, will, if we're looking at even London, the Bostwick Center or anything else, these are Y projects that have been done together. We can certainly continue this relationship and to start this relationship and move forward. So am I seeing nods that, okay, let's start with this one and move forward as we do our strategic planning process towards the feasibility study type piece to move forward. Okay. I'm back to Councillor Kohler and Councillor Wookie's thoughts of, if we're looking at something in the 2.99 area, we're looking for something in the neighborhood of 200, and you did the math, about 280,000 difference, I think, something like that. 3.5, 305,000. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Councillor Clark.
I would agree with Councillor Kohler and just take it out of reserves. The last 3 or 4 years that I recall, every year we've put money back into reserves. So we've done a good job at budgeting, and we've done a better job at the way the different departments have spent taxpayers' money. And every year we put money back in reserves. So I'm gambling that Councillor Kohler is right again this year, and we'll be able to do a good job and not have to hatch it anymore on this budget.
I'd like to ask him directly, Mr. Treasurer. I know that we do have reserves. They're there for certain reasons, and some of them are even based around being able to lower taxes if we need to. Your comfort on us taking that amount of money to arrive at a budgeted amount and taking it out of reserves?
Yeah, it'll work. The only issue I see is if we're stepping back, we'll be contributing less than we did this year. It's a little bit of a step back because we're budgeting to put 200,000 in, so it'll be 200 plus another 150 out. I'm sure we can find another 150,000 if we come back to not putting any into capital. We can find another 150,000 somewhere in there to make it. If we use 350, it'll get us to 295.
2.95. Thank you. Councillor Kohler on that.
Thanks. Yeah. And as I said earlier, it's a different scenario because we're looking down the road, right? So I wouldn't normally say that that's a way to do it and reduce it, but we'll have the opportunity. I'm just trying to spread the pain out for the people of today and help share it with the windfall that we have coming down the road, right? So we can look at doing that. And as Councillor Clark said too, I firmly believe that being out early, we're not going to really see that reduction. We're going to end up with some good cost savings from that and be able to do some more. And if you're looking for some other line items, I got 2 right here where I'm pretty sure that we can reduce as that. But at the end of the day, I feel comfortable if we reduce that contribution to capital and make it up through the reserves, and we'll definitely be on the winning side in the long run.
If that's what we're talking about, questions and comments from council. Councillor Wookie.
Thank you very much. I say this half tongue in cheek, half seriously. I'm betting on Mr. DeLebeck getting tenders out in the street early, and he's going to make that money back for us. And I'll certainly buy him a coffee, need him and a donut if that happens. So I think that he's on the job, and I'm confident in him.
Are we supposed to pick a horse in this race? I didn't. Yeah. Perfect. Further questions from council on us going that route? First of all, Councillor Peters, then Councillor Clark.
Well, thanks, Your Worship. I do still have a couple questions I want to ask of some department heads about the budget, but I also would like to hear from Councillor Kohler, because if he's got some other ideas that could potentially mean we don't have to pull money out of reserves and they're cost savings that we can all buy into, I would rather look at that than dipping into the reserves. So I'll leave it at that point, but I do want to come back to a couple other.
I'll leave you time if we come to this conclusion. Councillor Kohler and then Councillor Clark.
Well, I hate to do it because I'm picking on the horse that Councillor Wilkie just picked, but it's roads and transportation. page 18 and 19, line item 3999 and 599, and I was looking at a reduction of 50,000 of each, which falls in line with the 5-year average of those two budget lines. And that's 100,000 there, and that's less money out of reserves. And again, if all of a sudden, you know, global warming doesn't come and we get a huge snowfall, then, you know, the makeup could be out of operating reserves. But those were two line items that I was looking at for a total of 100,000, but 50,000 each.
Okay, Councillor Clark.
Thanks. Mine was a general question. Just, we had talked earlier in the year about Valley View's day program, and I don't see anything in here. And I'm just wondering if city manager or staff could make any comments about whether or not we're preparing to look at in the future for next year, how we might reduce the wait list and how we might be able to expand that program. And I don't know if it means whether it's just staff or whether we need to rent a second facility or put an addition on at Valley View. But I'd just like to see some progress made next year in that area. And we haven't budgeted for it this year, and I'm just wondering where we're going with that in the future.
Mr. Carroll. Can you enlighten us on day program?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we're still waiting for announcements from Ontario Health on any funding for potential expansion of adult day program services, not just in our area, but across the whole Southwest. So we haven't, right now we have received no extra funding for any kind of redevelopment.
This may be another place where we can attack at Roma or one of those things. Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Mr. Herbert.
Yeah, no, fine, thank you. Just a quick question for Mr. Carroll sits down. Do you have to apply for that funding, or is that something here's X number of dollars, or do you have to actually apply for it?
Your Worship, we would have to apply for it if they follow the regular process of allocating those types of funds. But we'll certainly,
am I right? It's much like recreational funding or something else. We're waiting for the OHT to say, we have funding for day programs, and at which point you jump right on it and say, I'm ready to go, and we could do another. Am I saying that about right?
you are saying that correctly. Yes, I will certainly, if funding is available, I will come back to council with a recommendation. And then council will be able to deliberate that. And then we can move forward with an adult day program proposal.
Perfect.
Just to follow up, Your Worship?
Yes, by all means.
So when you say you're ready to go, this is not like the aquatic center, we're ready to go. Are you ready to go, or have you got plans, what you want, or anything on paper, or how does that work for you?
We would have to determine the level of funding, the criteria that would come with the funding, but no, it wouldn't. We would be in a position to move fairly quickly with that. It's our expansion to the day program certainly is not as complex as a major undertaking like an aquatic center. No.
If I can summarize, I'm going to go to you, Councillor Peters, to help us with what other questions you have, but I wanted to be even doing that, thanking everybody who's been here tonight to sitting through some of this, helping us get here. So Councillor Peters, you're next.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I really appreciated the budget survey that had been done. I think some of the comments were most interesting. One of the things that really struck me in reading them was the support of the community for our protective services.
Yes.
And as the community is trying to guide us as to how they want us to spend their money, I think it came through loud and clear in those budget surveys that protective and security services are important to us. And there's significant investments that we're making in policing, fire, to make sure that we've got the best firefighters around. And I just wanted to say thanks to Chief Roskamp and Chief Gregory for the budget you prepared. They challenged us a bit, but I think the community is telling us that is an investment that we need to make, and I thank you both for that. But to the chief, I have one question: how is our drone working? I never hear anything about the drone. I saw some photos and we funded that last year for you and I'm just curious how it's working. Has it been any assistance in policing?
Sure.
Chief, great to have you up.
Thank you. To Councillor Peters, the drone is working wonderful. We have 2 pilots, and that has been put in the air several times over the last year at relatively little expense. So the drone works. It takes pictures. It does infrared. It has infrared technology. And it's been a big help for us in a number of criminal investigations and missing persons investigations. So.
Great. You have more?
I have one other, but if Councilor Herbert passed to the chief,
Okay, go.
Thank you. You can stay up because it's going to reflect on you, Mark. When I read the survey, and I had to go through it a couple of times, to me, that survey doesn't reflect what it is like today on Talbot Street. It was a year ago, and the changes in Talbot Street are amazing. Your special constables, the 6 of them, or soon to be 8, hopefully. Unbelievable change on Talbot Street. I mean, I walk my dog every night from Foodland. We cruise the drag down for a little ride to Ross Street. I don't see anything anymore. Maybe down by the end, but there's no tents. There's nobody lingering on the streets. Compliment to you guys. I just think that's so good. So, and I didn't see that in that survey. They talked about how bad it was. I don't think those people have ever been downtown. You know, they make those comments. So, but anyway, just thank you for your work on getting those special constables. They're so important on Talbot Street. So
thank you.
Just a comment to you.
Thank you.
I don't know if you wanted to comment on them, but the job they do, but.
Sure.
Through your worship.
Yeah.
The special constable team really is a team that is unlike any in the province. And this team has been designed to deal with the social and health related determinants and put our officers back to core functions. And we're living in unprecedented times when there's rise in violent crime. We know our crime severity index has increased. Our call volume is approaching 25,000 calls for service. That's where we send police officers. Our calls into the communication center are 60,000 plus. Of that 60,000 plus, there are 15,000 911 emergency calls that we dispatch out to our own officers, to the Elmer officers, to the ambulance, and to our fire colleagues. So we need to find ways to put police officers back to core functions. And this the civilianization project that we've undertaken with the special constables in our core was just that. And I can tell you, our program is the envy in the province. My peers have reached out to me to ask how it's done. There are regulatory and legislative provisions that require the use of special constables only for certain duties. And we found that formula. So it is working. I agree with you. If there's any sign that things are improving, look no further than Light It Up and Pumpkin Prowl, where we had hundreds, and I would suggest close to 1,000 for Pumpkin Prowl, where I didn't see anybody tenting and I didn't see anybody under blankets or open drug use in our downtown core. So I appreciate the positive comments.
Thank you. Councilor Peters.
Question for Heather Sheridan.
Okay, I'm going to start feeling bad and writing names. Who hasn't got asked a question yet? So.
Well, I could find something for everyone. I've tried to make everybody talk. So, Heather, this, and I realize Ontario Works is the city's proportion of what we put into Ontario Works is it's significant, but it's not. We're not paying the whole bill. But it troubles me to see that you're forecasting an 8% increase in OW caseloads in 2024. And, you know, I drive around the city and I see the help wanted signs, et cetera. And I realize that, Ontario Works, like, you know, if you don't have a rent subsidy, you can't even find a place to live unless you're couch surfing someplace. And I'm just curious, what are you eyeballing down the horizon that says we've got jobs out there, yet we're still going to see an 8% increase in Ontario Works?
Thank you. Thank you through you, Mayor, to Councillor Peters.
Really good question. I can tell you the forecasting is done by the province. So they give every city across to every service manager the forecast for the year. And we go back and look, and they're generally spot on. So that's, I feel confident by saying an 8% increase based on what they tell us. There are lots of jobs, and there's an employment services transformation happening right now, which will happen in our city in January. And hopefully that number will not come to fruition, the 8%. But at this point, that's what they're saying. The other issue we're running into is there are a number of people on assistance who require mental health and addiction support. And there's just not simply enough resources. And a lot of those people probably should be on ODSP, and there aren't enough doctors. So without a doctor, you can't apply for ODSP. So as the economy changes, as our housing crisis happens, people's mental health and addictions, like their mental health deteriorates. And so they end up without a home, without a job, and needing resources. And that's why the province is looking at an 8% for our community, an 8% increase.
If I can summarize, Councillor Baldwin Sands, please go ahead. Pick someone who hasn't been picked. No, go ahead.
Thank you. Actually, I am, and it's more of a shout out to some of the department work that's been going on. And if I could, I have 3 different areas. And the
Great.
first is for human resources.
Yes.
And I was hoping that Ms. Schultz could come to talk about the conversation that we had earlier about what is been happening in WSIB, how those increases have been going up, and how we as a community and the Human Resources Department are going to move forward and bring a light onto some of those items. And then I would have the
Good.
second
We
one.
have 2 more after that, and I'll give them to you. Ms. Schultz.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Councillor Baldwin Sands. I did have a conversation with her earlier today about the budget, and we are projecting to be in a deficit at the end of the year, knowing that it's been kind of year over year that we've been in a deficit situation. Next year, we will be targeting 3 of our main departments to get a better handle on those claim costs. So police, fire, and Valley View seem to be our 3 main departments that we see some pretty intensive claims. So we are planning to work with WSIB next year to get a better handle on costs.
Super. Councillor Baldwin Sands.
Thank you. My next one is a shout out to Michelle Shannon and Environmental Services. The whole resource recovery. I know she's not here, but if you would like to give her my best, or if you have any comments that you would like to make. The things that she has been doing for resource recovery, circular economy, the reduction of 25% to our community recycling center. I am looking at other opportunities on the horizon, and I look forward to her future reports on that. But I wanted to give a shout out to that because it's not just a cost reduction, but it has been a revenue producer for the community. And I wanted to recognize that as well. In addition, Valley View, and I know Michael is here. I've noticed that there has been no real projects that have been going on at Valley View. And this year we finally see something in the budget where some things are happening at Valley View for our residents because it is their place that they call home. I just want to talk about, or hoping that he could highlight some of the things that he has put in the budget this year, because Valley View has always been near and dear to my purpose here on council. So I was hoping he would take a moment to talk about some of those projects that are happening at Valley View.
Mr. Carroll, we so seldomly have you here. Get some time in.
Thank you, Your Worship. I know I've been here a lot lately.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. Certainly, we're moving forward this year at Valley View with our increased staffing program that is funded by the provincial government. So we have additional staff that are being added to meet the 4.0 hours of care. We're moving forward with our courtyard extension, or expand an extension, but redesign in our center courtyard. That's been it's been something that we wanted to do for a while, and thanks to the Ralph and Noreen Council funding, we were able to move forward with that particular project as well. Also, we're working on some projects to upgrade our door and security systems. And our building was opened in 2006. And as we talked about earlier, our debt is coming to an end in 2026. Our building will be 20 years old. It's hard to believe we've been there on our current site that long, but that is the case. Time marches along. So those are some of the projects that we're working on. We're glad that we're able and hopefully will continue to operate in a semi-COVID world where we still have some restrictions at Valley View, but for the most part, we are open. We are conducting our activities within our recreation department, with a focus on ensuring that the residents are able to participate in all of the activities they did prior to COVID hitting us. So hope that kind of answers your question.
Perfect.
Thank you. Please convey my gratitude to them, and I'm sure
All
it
of
would
them.
echo for all of council.
Okay.
Thank
I
you.
think Councillor Kohler has a question up. So I thought while you're up.
Yeah, well, Michael's up and I think he knows what I'm gonna be talking about. It didn't make this budget and I know it's got some challenging things for it, but when we talk about the Valley View being a residence home and there is some people that are having some challenges getting to outside care because of wheelchair accessibility and things like that. So Michael has been working on some options and I know it didn't make it here because there's some challenges with that, but I've asked him if he can continue to look at how we could provide that because it is very costly for these residents to secure alternative transportation for this. And we do have the infrastructure for it. It's just whether or not we have the staff to help out. But I know he continues to see what he can do because he certainly cares for the people that he works with. But I just want to thank Michael for that. And hopefully we can see something in the next budget or a program that comes out that might not even impact the budget at all, but thanks for doing that.
We will continue to work on that and we'll certainly bring something back. Yeah.
Thank you. If I can just add to council, thank you. Passing a budget of this significant size in one night is not an easy. I thank the staff and the treasurer for getting information to us in a timely fashion so we can look at it and say yay or nay. For us to come in a year of significant inflation at 3% or less, I'll say 2.99. So we're there. Is it a significant event for when I'm hearing from my colleagues in municipalities neighboring? We will be the envy. Thank you very much. And the amount of capital work that we've scheduled in here is a significant amount going forward. And I cannot thank you enough for this team and how well it works together, specifically on things like budgeting and next with strategic planning in order to make the city roll in the way that this budget should allow it to do. So thank you all. This has been a long night, and I thank all of you in the audience who came hoping we'd ask you really hard questions about, why is that truck painted that color or those types of things. But I really thank the group for sticking to how do we do a good budget? How do we spend the money properly that the taxpayers of St. Thomas bring to us, send to us in order to spend? So I thank you all. Anything else from council? I guess there's motions or something we need to do.
Your worship, would it be fair to say that council consider the following motion, that council establish the 2024 budget at a target percentage increase of 3.49% as presented, noting that 0.54% is to be recovered from reserves?
That's a fine way to put it if you want, but is that Councillor Kohler, your thoughts?
I just want to make sure I understand that you put 3.49 in there, right?
With 0.54% to be recovered from reserves.
So that'll drop that to the
2.9.
Okay, thanks. Just want.
You okay if it reads it that way? I don't mind. It shows us how we got there. Okay. Yes.
Moved by Councillor Herbert, seconded by Councillor McCauley.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Really expecting no answer to that? No, sorry. Questions or comments? Seeing none? All those in favor? Now take that same hand you voted with, bend it around and pat yourself on the back. This is good, hard work. Thank you. Any other motions?
I have a motion by Counselor Baldwin Sands, seconded by Counselor Kohler. Motion for adjournment.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? Carried.